Trust and Will is an online estate planning service. Visit trustandwill.com for details.
Ooh, Trust and Will.
My dad and I were always close, but some things we just didn't talk about, like his will. After he was gone, we found out he didn't have one, and it created a lot of stress during a time of grief.
Creating a will can be hard to think about, but avoiding it can lead to greater difficulty for the people you love. That's why Trust and Will makes estate planning simple. Create a will online in as little as 30 minutes.
Now, I have a will in place to make sure my loved ones are protected. With Trust and Will, it was easy and affordable, and I got peace of mind knowing my wishes are clear.
Trust and Will.
Get 20% off when you visit trustandwill.com/future. That's trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. trustandwill.com/FUTURE.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're certainly going to be taking a look at the SEC landscape. We've got tons of big SEC games on Wednesday. We're going to be previewing all those. We're going to ask him what team outside of Florida has the best chance of being able to make a run in the NCAA tournament. What do we make out of all these, shall we say, hodgepodge teams that are sort of like on the bubble / going to be in the NCAA tournament but not a high seed in the SEC, and just teams in general that he's taking a look at in / outside of the SEC that might be able to make a little bit of an impact here moving forward. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters M, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter / X questions today. Might be a little bit shorter with the recap today than I normally am because I had 4 hours of VSiN to do on VSiN Prime Time, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. It's a little bit shorter on time, but we had a great day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's recap it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the Rowdy recap.
Your top against the spread team in all of college basketball is Miami of Ohio at now 19-6 against the spread. They've also been a really good over team. They see their game against Eastern Michigan go under as they're now up to 17 overs to 8 unders, and Eastern Michigan is actually a really good against the spread team as well. Now 19-9 against the spread after Miami of Ohio got the job done 74-64 the final. Now Miami of Ohio was up 43-22 at the half. Spirited second half from Eastern Michigan, but Miami of Ohio finds a way to get the job done even with going just 5 out of 28 from 3-point range. You had Eastern Michigan lose the rebound battle 46-44 as for Miami of Ohio. Brent Byers was the man that stepped up on this day, 16 points, and Miami of Ohio just kept it clean. They win the turnover battle 11-4, so they do find a way on this day. For Duke, no hangover after they were able to have that big giant win against Michigan over the weekend. Duke has actually been a really good under team. This game goes over, so now 19 unders to 9 overs, 156. They land-based Notre Dame. For this Duke team, they go 34 out of 38 at the free throw line. Lots of fouls in this game. And for Notre Dame, they went 7 of 26 from 3. Duke, 12 of 33 from the outside. Cameron Boozer, yet another double-double, 24 points, 13 rebounds, 3 steals. Duke was able to win the turnover battle 15-9. They win the rebound battle 49-27. Just absolutely layways to Notre Dame. And for Arizona, maybe some lingering effects from that win against Houston. They were trailing at the half against Baylor. They do rally in the second half. If you had a closing number of 4, you got to push. If you took this overnight, you were able to get there with Baylor as they open up like a 9.5 to a 10.5 point underdog, but 87-80 the final. As for Arizona, you had no Cole Pete in this game, but you had Braden Burries along with Jaden Bradley combining for 49 points on Bradley, 5 of 8 from 3. Arizona does go 9 of 21 from the outside. Baylor just 7 of 22, but Baylor had themselves a nice performance out of Cameron Carr. He drove them to 26 points. It's a Baylor team that has been relatively rough against the spread this far this season. If you've been betting on them, they're now against the spread 11-16, but on this night, a little bit more of a spirited effort. Very spirited effort from Virginia, 90-61. They absolutely lambaste NC State. As for Virginia, they've been an interesting up and down team against the spread, 14-12-2, but on this day, NC NC State just had absolutely nothing whatsoever. 9 of 33 from three-point range. For NC State, they overall shoot 29% from the floor. Virginia, 12 of 26 from three. What looked like it was going to be a very easy under turned into a little bit of sweat. Still stayed under the total of about 151 half, 152, about 100 points in the second half after 51 in the first half. And for Virginia, they had the Darius Ritter go off for 19 big points in this one. Off the bench, Chance Mallory, Jakari White, they combined for 26 points with White going 4 of 5 from three. Virginia won the rebound battle 40-36. They were able to do a nice job dominating this game. And for NC State, by the way, Darian Williams only about 14 points in this game. So a little bit of a rough one there. Michigan has had a tough time being able to cover double-figure spreads, and they play a game that just barely stays under the total against Minnesota, the state with the small strengths in the Union, as that was a final of 74-64 for Minnesota. They've been a solid under team, 17 unders to 11 overs thus far this season, and they got absolutely nothing off the bench. Kai Shinholster played 7 minutes off the bench. Everything else came from the starters. And for Minnesota, boy, did they get dump trucked on the glass. They lose a rebound by 39-18. But Michigan only got to the free throw line 5 times. They go 14 out of 33 from three-point. They lose a turnover battle. Michigan does 14-8. That's a big reason why they did not cover this big number. But Ellie Kadu was able to supply 15 points. Yaxel Lindenborg just 3 points and 2 rebounds in this game. So that was a little bit suspect. But overall, Michigan, they do find a way to not be victims of the upset, unlike St. Louis. St. Louis has been a really good against the spread team thus far this season, but they get completely lambasted 77-62. As for St. Louis, still really good against the spread team, 16-9-2 against the spread, but on this night they just couldn't get a lot to drop. They shoot 40% from the floor, 5 of 21 from three-point range. Robbie Avila had 10 points on 7 shots. He expected maybe a little bit more there. For St. Louis, they win the rebound battle 35-30, but if they have a kryptonite, it's turnovers. They lose that turnover battle 15-10. For Dayton, you had 17 points out of Javon Bennett, and for St. Louis, they allowed Dayton to go 8 of 20 from three-point range. For Cincinnati, they have been on to being one of the best under teams in all of college basketball, and they've been honestly a little bit better here against the spread recently, but 80-68 for Texas Tech. They get the job done in Cincinnati. Now 9 overs to 19 unders, as the Cincinnati offense has been looking a little bit better here recently. For Cincinnati, they win the turnover battle 12-3, but they allow Texas Tech to go 10-25 from 3. And Christian Anderson, 31 points. He had himself a big performance, and for Cincinnati, 8 of 24 from the outside. Cincinnati, with no JT Toppin in there, they lose a rebound battle to Texas Tech 40-24, as Anderson had 11 rebounds. You've got Luke Bumboy, who's seeing some more minutes. He was able to give the team 3 blocks down low, so Texas Tech, so far so good without one Mr. JT Toppin. And right now, things are looking good for Iowa State, 75-59. They take down Utah's. For Utah, they just weren't unable to take care of the ball in this game. They lose the turnover battle 18-9. For Utah, they did have Terrence Brown go off for 18 points, but Joshua Jefferson, most versatile player out there on the floor, 21 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. You had Milan Milosevic go 4 of 8 from three-point range. Iowa State only 7 of 23 from three-point range, but they get a nice easy win. They cover that closing number of about 14 and a half or so, so they get the job done there. Also being able to get the job done, Central Florida on the road, they got up to as high as being 14-14.5 point underdogs, 97-84. Just a complete and utter lambastement in this game. As for Central Florida, they've been an interesting team against the spread thus far this season, as they are up to now 16 unders to 11 overs thus far this season. So they've actually been a little bit more of an under team, now 14-13 against the spread. But for BYU, the offense really wasn't an issue here. They go 9 of 27 for three-point range. AJ Davansa goes for 29 points, 8 rebounds. For BYU, they win the turnover battle 15-9, but Central Florida, 14 out of 24 from three-point. Samus Folks, 24 points, 11 assists, did have 7 turnovers, but Jordan Burks throws in their 24 points, so a nice win there. And then for Tennessee, they fall on the road to Missouri, 73-69. The final, as Tennessee has been one of your lesser against the spread teams as far this season. For Tennessee against the spread, they're now checking in 12-15-1, and Missouri has had a little bit of an up and down year themselves, not going to lie. This win brings them now to 13-15 against the spread, but for Missouri, they did a nice job in terms of winning that rebound battle by a count of 15-8. And for Missouri, T.O. Barrett, 28 points. He had himself a massive performance, 5 rebounds. And Tennessee does win the rebound battle 42-30, but they also went 8 of 14 at the free throw line. That was very costly to them. So there were a lot of very interesting teams that were in action on this night. And if you're looking at a little bit more action as well, Bowling Green, a little bit of a rough loss against Western Michigan, 88-79 final in that one. And it's been been an interesting year against the spread with regards to a lot of these MAC teams, as outside of Miami of Ohio, your biggest money-making team was Eastern Michigan, but Buffalo, they're 17-9 against the spread. A lot of places closed their number at right around about 14.5. It looked like they were going to get a very easy cover against Akron as they were down just 4 points at the half. They hold on to be able to get you that cover, 99-85. The final is Akron 9-21 from 3-point. Shavari Johnson, 23 points, and Akron has been a really good team in terms of just being able to put points up on the board, but you did get a nice cover there. And if you're looking at the biggest fade in the MAC right now, 10-18 against the spread for UMass. The Minutemen, they fall on the road against Ball State, 74-73. The final, they were the favorites, so they lose outright. And for UMass, they do go 13 of 16 at the free throw line. They win the rebound battle 49-41, but lost that turnover battle 14-10. So a little bit of a rough one out there, and it was a rough one for Indiana. They lose outright to Northwestern by a count of 72-68, as we did see a lot of unranked Big Ten teams in action. UCLA, they completely lambaste USC 81-62 the final, and right now for Indiana, they have fallen to not being a very profitable team for you, 13-15 against the spread. Northwestern, they're just 11-15-2 against the spread. Looked like perhaps Tucker DeVries got fouled on a three to try to tie the game, as Indiana went 10 of 28 from 3-point, but Northwestern, they do a nice job winning the turnover battle 10-9. They actually won the rebound battle 34-23 with Nick Martinelli give you 28 points. So they find a way to persevere, get the job done in that one. For USC and UCLA, they've been two teams that have been sub 500 against the spread, but UCLA 81-62. They get the job done with Donovan Dent being able to supply 30 points. And for UCLA, they go 7-20 from 3-point range. For Washington, they cover against Rutgers 79-72. The final is Hans Steinbach, 24 points, 16 rebounds, went into total takeover mode, and Washington is now 17-11 against the spread. I don't think that a lot of people had that one on their bingo card, but hey, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of finding a way to be able to cover some spreads. Another team that was able to cover a spread, it went to overtime, but for Oklahoma State, they do find a way at home to be able to get the job done against the West Virginia team that just, frankly, has not been the same team when they have been away from home this far this season. That by kind of 91-84, and for TCU, they were able to take down Arizona State in a game that featured 115 points in the second half. 90-78 final in that game. And if you are taking a look at your top teams in the Big 12 against the spread, Arizona State is actually 17-10 and 1 against the spread, so they're not in cover against TCU. That's a little bit of an interesting one. Oklahoma State, with their cover, they're now up to 12-16 against the spread. They've had a little bit of a rough year out there. And then we saw a lot of Mountain West play as well, and you had Air Force having covered just 1 out of their last 14 games entering into the day on Tuesday. They're now up to 8-19-1 against the spread this season. They were a 6.5 to a 7-point underdog against San Jose State. They find a way to cover 86-80 the finalists. Air Force is now playing a lot of overs as well because their defense is awful. San Jose State, 13 out of 24 from 3-point range. They had 34 points out of Adrian Myers, but for Air Force, they held in there because Lucas Hubben was able to give you 21 points, went 5 of 12 from 3-point range, and Air Force 14 out of 22 at the free throw line. But hey, they do get the cover out there. Fresno State now 19-8 against the spread. They don't get the outright win against Colorado State, but they do find a way to cover 74-70 the finalists. For Fresno State, they go 8 of 21 from 3-point range. Deshaun Gorey, 23 points, and Colorado State, a good 3-point shooting team. They went just 9 of 29 from 3-point range, but did win the rebound battle 35-31. So that was another interesting one. You've had Nevada be a really good cover team at 17-11 against the spread, and they find a way to be able to storm back against New Mexico to be able to get you the outright win. As for Nevada, 67-60 final in this one. And by the way, I do have to point this out. New Mexico has actually been one of your top over teams in all of college basketball as well. 18 overs to 9 unders for them this far this season. UNLV has also been. They've been covering about 66% of their games to the over, so we'll see what happens on Wednesday with them. But that said, for Nevada, they do find a way to be able to persevere here, despite the fact that just 46 points in the first half, because for Nevada, they were the better free throw shooting team. 16 out of 22 at the charity stripe. Elijah Price, Von Weems, and Corey Camper, all with either 21 or 20 points apiece. And for New Mexico, 12 of 21 at the free throw line. And for New Mexico, played even up with regards to turnover battle, 13-13, lost the rebound battle, 44-32. So that was a good one for the Nevada Wolfpack. And then you did see Boise State be able to win 72-62 against Wyoming. So they find a way there. And Wyoming now 12-15 against the spread. So things have been a little bit less than tremendous on that front. We'll throw in there as well Colorado State, even though they did not get the cover on Tuesday, now 16-11 against the spread. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been an underdog and an under season. 2,447 unders, 2,390 overs, and with the underdogs, they're in at about 51%, 2,490, 2,346 against the spread. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, been a little bit more overwhelming, 170 overs to 164 unders, and the underdogs hitting at 53.5%. They've just been hitting all season long, 179 and 155 against the spread. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat some SEC and so much more with Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Houston Family Podcast.
Trust and Will is an online estate planning service. Visit trustandwill.com for details.
Trust and Will.
My dad and I were always close, but some things we just didn't talk about, like his will. After he was gone, we found out he didn't have one, and it created a lot of stress during a time of grief.
Creating a will can be hard to think about, but avoiding it can lead to greater difficulty for the people you love. That's why Trust and Will makes estate planning simple. Create a will online in as little as 30 minutes.
Now, I have a will in place to make sure my loved ones are protected. With Trust and Will, it was easy and affordable, and I got peace of mind knowing my wishes are clear.
Trust and Will.
Get 20% off when you visit trustandwill.com/future. That's trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. trustandwill.com/FUTURE.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Blake Lovell aboard, who does such tremendous work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Obviously, his main beat is taking a look at what we're getting in the Southeastern Conference, but he does a great job looking at all things in terms of college basketball. He, much like myself, gearing up for what is going to be a great stretch run going into the NCAA tournament, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And Blake, it has been a very wild season, to say the least, in the SEC. And just what do you make out of the landscape right now? Because just whenever I take a look at this conference, I think that all paths lead me to this thing running through Florida and them being able to pick up steam, not just in this conference, but nationally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the way it's played out to this point. Obviously, they've got a game with, well, 2 games this week that I think are pretty interesting for them, in terms of that road game against Texas and then the game against Arkansas. But, I mean, so far, it's just you look at what they've done, and, I mean, it's hard not to be impressed. I mean, you think about it, they have that one game at Missouri to start SEC play where they lose by 2, kind of have that one game that I feel like everyone has at some point where you lose at home to Auburn. And other than that, I mean, they have just been so impressive, and really during this, last month or so, they have been kind of what Florida was last year at this time. That's what they look like. And so that's been the most impressive thing, is they've been able to pretty much come close to replicating that. And yeah, I think everyone else is kind of just feeling like they're trying to find those ways to sort of keep up with Florida. And, whether it's kind of that group in the middle at Tennessee, Arkansas, and Alabama, or even a team like Vanderbilt or someone like that who's trying to kind of play their way back up into that top tier. Yeah, it's been kind of interesting to see how it's all played out.
Absolutely. And when you take a look at the SEC, who do you think might be that biggest competitor to Florida right now? Because I do think that we've got ourselves a great slate of games that are going to be coming up the next few days, as we're doing this prior to knowing how the SEC results for Tuesday panned out. But we do know that on Wednesday, it is going to be Florida. We just mentioned it, taking on Texas. We've actually got a lot of Wednesday games out there in the SEC. And I do think that that Vanderbilt versus Georgia game is so interesting because these two were two of the hottest teams in the SEC coming into conference play, and both have hit some bumps in the road.
Yeah, I think, in terms of scheduling, I think Alabama has the best chance to probably, if there's going to be a team that's right there beside Florida in the standings right now, you've got that 2-game gap between them. And of course, if it came down to a tiebreaker, Florida would obviously have that, but based on what they did to Alabama. But you look at this Alabama team, right? And I mean, they've won 6 in a row now, had the game of the year against Arkansas last week. And now if you look at their remaining schedule, it's like they play home games against Mississippi State and Auburn, road games at Tennessee and Georgia. I mean, they have a great chance to go 3-1 in that stretch, with the game at Tennessee probably being the one that could go against them. But even that one is a very winnable game, I think, for the Tide. So it's entirely possible that if they were to go win that one, I mean, that Alabama could finish the regular season on a 10-game winning streak. I don't think that's unrealistic based on their remaining schedule. So Alabama's probably the team I would circle. I said that earlier in the season. I thought at full strength, they may be the team with the highest upside in the SEC. I think Florida's kind of, afforded that a little bit just based on how good they've been. But Alabama might be right there still in that discussion. And, even I think Arkansas to a certain extent, I think there's a lot of people for Arkansas coming out of that game against Alabama. They lost, but I almost think there's a lot of people who came out of that feeling better about Arkansas maybe than Alabama. And I think that's just showing you what Darius Acuff can do and all that. And they've got kind of a tough schedule left. They've got the home games against A&M and Texas, road games at Florida, Missouri. So it wouldn't be surprising to see Arkansas drop some games here over the next couple of weeks, but I don't think that really takes away from their ability to make a pretty deep run in the tournament.
Yep, and I think the big key for both of these teams getting any sort of defense whatsoever, because we know what sort of offensive teams both of them are, and we saw that game between Arkansas and Alabama, and, well, if you, like me, took the under, that had absolutely no shot whatsoever. As Blake Lovell, who does jury work over at Southeastern 16, he is trying to be right here on Cusco Soups, and you were mentioning Arkansas. They do have a tough game coming up on Wednesday against Texas A&M, and right now they're being listed as an 8.5-point favorite. I do want to get your thoughts here, because A&M at one point was leading the SEC. They've had a little bit of, shall we say, an up and down last few weeks. They take that 4-game losing streak. They get back online with wins over Ole Miss and Oklahoma, but we both know that these are two teams that are towards the bottom of the SEC. Now they've got themselves a tough test on the road against Arkansas, and I think that this is going to be a very fascinating game because, again, you've got two teams that absolutely love to push tempo, and I think the key for Texas A&M is, can they generate turnovers? Because if so, I think that they can get back online. If not, might be a long night on Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They got to force turnovers against a team that's taking care of the ball better than anybody in SEC play in Arkansas. And, again, that's the Darius Acuff effect. It's just that when you're going up against Arkansas, you just don't see them making that many mistakes, even for a guy who's played, 36, 37 minutes a game, whatever it is now in SEC play. He just does not make that many mistakes. And that's why he's so good, is that he's able to be as effective as he is and still regularly just not give the ball to the other team. And I think when you look at the way A&M is going to try to pressure them, I just see Arkansas as the kind of team that really understands, and you see they're such a good passing team. I think they're the kind of team that could really just go at A&M here and make it very problematic. Now, the one thing that could separate it is simply, as we talked about with some of these matchups, you've got two teams that are going to get their points in a much different way. A&M's, a high-volume three-point shooting team. Arkansas is going to come right at you, although they can still shoot the three pretty well. And I think that's it. Anytime you get a team like this in Texas A&M who can shoot it as well as they can from three, you're going to get a wide, array of outcomes. And, we've seen that. Look how well they shot the ball at Alabama. They put up 97. Yeah, they lost, but look how well, they were able to do that. And then you look at kind of the contrast. You look at what they did at Vanderbilt. They go 8 of 29 for 28% from three. So I think that's going to be the big thing here, is that A&M is good enough to just get hot against anybody and win the game. But you also, look at some of those games where they've struggled a little bit and they've just not shot it very well. And so I think that's going to be the big key to me. And like you said, if they can force turnovers, which would be an uncharacteristic thing for Arkansas, as good as they've been in that area, A&M's got a great chance to win this one. But I could also see a scenario where if the shots aren't falling, Arkansas could run them out of the building.
Yep, absolutely. I think that that's going to be a game of very high variance. And I do think that when taking a look at the SEC, the team with perhaps the highest ceiling and the lowest floor moving forward might be Arkansas, because if the shots are falling on that night, man, this team is absolutely unstoppable. But if they're not, things could be a little bit wobbly for them. So I'm very curious to see how that game is going to be going as well. And we've talked a lot about the top teams in the conference, Arkansas, Alabama, and Florida. And when you do take a look at the conference, among the teams that we're going to say are outside the top four, because Tennessee, certainly I think that they can be able to make a run in the tournament. Sort of need to see it to believe it in terms of covering spreads out of Rick Barnes' squad in March. But that said, they've got a rock solid defense. I like the way that Nate Ament is being able to come along. But outside of those four teams, is there a team or two that you think might be a little bit pesky come March and you think might have a little bit of upside, even though they might either be on the bubble or like a 7, 8, or even lower seed?
Yeah, and I think the team I'm going to name, their biggest issue could be where they're seated, because I can absolutely see them being in the 8-9, and I don't know how they really get out of that. In all honesty, I think they'd be better off being a 10 than being in the 8-9 game. So maybe okay if they just want to win and lose some the rest of the way, but it's Texas, and we'll see how they match up with Florida on Wednesday night. But I think they are the kind of team, and that's where if you watch Texas play, you do the offensive comparison game, and I tell people, well, Alabama's third in offensive efficiency, Arkansas is fourth in offensive efficiency, and Texas is sixth. Now, that's going to surprise some people because I feel like you have a pretty distinct idea of how Arkansas and Alabama score. And yet Texas feels so different from both of them. And it's not in every way, but there are just some ways where they just feel different. And yet you look at how effective they are in what they do. They're a team that obviously when it comes to just one-on-one isolation type stuff, they're very good at that. They're also very good at drawing fouls. We know, Voki Titus, as we've been talking, Greg, just got to the free throw line 2 more times, and they're not even playing a game right now. He just gets there so many times. And I think that's kind of the thing with Texas is in the right matchup. I think they are the kind of team, and we've seen this, right? Think about it. They've won games at Alabama. They won the game at Missouri by 17. They beat Vanderbilt at home. And even the games they've lost, like that's the thing to keep in mind here. Yeah, they just came off a disappointing game at Georgia. But, they lost by 5 at Kentucky. They lost by 6 at Auburn, 4 at home to A&M. I think this is a team. And remember, too, they lost by 8 to UConn back in December. I think in the right scenario, and this is where, again, just it's all about the matchups. I could see Texas being a team that wins 2 or 3 games even in the NCAA tournament, just because I think the talent is there. Dalen Swain's been fantastic, but look at the talent around him. I mentioned Voki Titus. You've got Tremont Mark, who's played a ton of games. You keep going down the line. Weaver is kind of that catalyst that makes things go and all those things. So I think Texas is a team to keep an eye on. It's all going to be about the draw. And that's why, like I said, I don't think if you're Texas, unless it's UConn, maybe you want to be anywhere near that 8-9 game. I almost think you're better off in the 7-10 because I do look at some of those potential 2 seeds and say, I could see Texas, matching up okay with a few of those 2 seeds potentially.
Yep, I think so as well. And with Texas, it is a team that can be a little bit hit or miss on the defensive side of things, but they really don't give up a lot of second and third chances. And if they can get Tremont Mark going, because it's been a rough season for him from 3-point range, that would be massive as well. And Blake, I always mention it. You do such a great job over at Southeastern 16, but that said, you're doing an amazing job covering the entire landscape of all of college basketball. And we are now less than 3 weeks away from Selection Sunday. And outside the SEC, it could be a high major, a mid-major, it's Steelers' choice here. Who's a team or two that you right now have your eye on that you're just feeling good about them as they make their stretch run towards March?
Yeah, I'm not going to say NC State again, Greg. Last time we had this conversation, I said NC State, and they came out and got obliterated at Louisville. So hopefully these teams that I mentioned this time don't find themselves in that position. But, there's one team, and only because we were kind of discussing today as we were looking at the brackets and stuff on our show, I think Wisconsin's pretty fascinating right now. They just came off of that win against Iowa over the past couple of weeks. They've got those wins against Illinois, Michigan State. But it's like they've also lost by 17 in Ohio State. They lost the game in Indiana. They had a home loss to USC. I still think they're so interesting because they also, of course, have the win at Michigan on their credit last month. So Wisconsin's a team that I'm kind of just circling a little bit because, again, you look at it like seed-wise, you could see them kind of in that range, of teams that, let's say they win their first game. I think, you put a matchup against somebody in the second round. Maybe that's one where, they use their effective offensive style of play to be able to beat somebody, pull off an upset, something like that. So I think that's something to watch, obviously, with Nick Boyd and what he can do. Wisconsin's a team I've kind of circled a little bit. And I think the other big story here, this is another one we've been talking about recently. Can BYU, just coming off of what we saw against Iowa State, and we're going to know this, I'm sure, as people listen, because they're playing UCF on Tuesday night as we record this, but can they find a way to keep this thing going, even without Richie Saunders? I always say, when in doubt, pick the team that has the best player. And there's not a lot of teams out there that are going to go into that game, have the best player on the floor, because BYU is going to have a chance to have that with their star. So I'm curious to see what is going to be the ceiling for BYU now without Saunders. And I know that's going to be the big storyline for them in terms of their seeding and all that as the selection committee looks at them entering it. But I think we saw in that Iowa State game, this is not a team that I think you can just completely count out based on how they're going to play. We always say you need one of those kind of stud players to get you on a run. They have that. And so I'm really kind of fascinated to see what they do here over the next couple of weeks. They don't have an easy remaining schedule, but I think, nonetheless, I think that's kind of a team, too, I'm circling to see seed-wise. Could they be one that remember how high they were ranked going into the season, and can they kind of get that form back a little bit heading into March?
Oh, no doubt about it. I'm going to be very intrigued to see what they're going to be able to do moving forward, and it is just a great landscape in college basketball in general. Blake, you're doing an incredible job of being able to cover it for Southeastern 16 and really covering the entire landscape of this great sport. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, check out all of our SEC stuff over at Southeastern 16, daily SEC basketball stuff there. And yeah, everything else college basketball, you can find me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake is doing such an incredible job looking at this great game of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, he wants such great insight. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on because Soup is now part of the VC family of podcasts, and coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GUNet_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order, which for the most part is time order. That said, we did get two added games that were supposed to be played on Tuesday that are going to be at the bottom because they were unexpected games. That would be the Boston College game, and they're taking on Wake Forest, and Xavier versus Providence. And then the extra games board is going to be in time order. Those are the Patriot League and the Atlantic Sun games, and I believe we've got a MEAC game as well involving Morgan State. So we are going to get things started with 679-680. The Citadel is on the road against Furman. Furman is a 16.5 point favorite. Total's anywhere between 141.5 to 142.5, and I'm in on the over. I did set my total at a 143.5. I recognize that the Citadel is not necessarily playing with a lot of tempo. They're 318th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Furman 247th, but Furman, in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage away from home, is a top 2 team in all of college basketball. They really don't light you up from 3. They're only shooting about 32.5% from the outside. The Citadel, they are shooting 31.3%, 305th in all of college basketball, but this is a Citadel team that's just absolutely ghastly on defense. 350th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Furman, they've been a respectable defense, 137th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This actually does take a little bit of a drop off outside the top 145 when they're at home, but still, all in all, doing a relatively solid job. And for the Citadel, you really only have one guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game in Solo Abassi, who's been able to give you about 8 to 9 points per game, throws in there those 5 to 6 rebounds and a little bit over a block per contest, and Furman should be able to manhandle them down low. You've got Asa Thomas back, who's your top 3-point shooter at 40%, throws in there 4 boards, 14 points per game. Cooper Bowser was dealing with the injury, and they've been able to get him back for about 13 points, 6 boards. Your main rebounder, Charles Johnson, gives you about 10 points, 9 rebounds per game. Big reason why this team is so efficient on the inside, and they're doing a great job locking down low low, as this Furman team is a top 125 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Furman not going to give you a lot of second and third chances, and their kryptonite on offense has been turnovers. They've been outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, outside the top 250 in terms of ball security on offense. The Citadel outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers. Not awful in terms of taking care of the ball, so I do think they get enough clean possessions for the over, especially with Christian Moore, Braxton Williams for the Citadel combining for about 25.5 points per game, and Moore has give you more from the outside, shooting 39% from three, pretty much a low man on the roster. Shoots about 34% from three. Carter Kingsbury throws in there about 4 boards, 8.5 points per game, but you don't have a lot outside that. I do think that the Citadel going to do just enough to be able to get you the over, because they do grab for themselves a few second and third chances, but I do think that this is a nice hammer spot for Furman. Set them as a 17.5 point favorite, willing to lay up to 17 with them, and I like the over. It did sell my total at a 143.5, 681, 682. Oakland is going to be on the road facing off against IU Indy. IU Indy, home underdogs of 5.5 points, 171.5 to 172.5 is the total. Set a total of a 167.5. I like the under. Now, both of these teams are very ghastly on defense, especially IU Indy. IU Indy is a classic gamble for turnovers team. They're a top 30 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but 354th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as they're outside the top 325 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Oakland, meanwhile, they're 322nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do a little bit of a better job guarding the perimeter, though. Teams are shooting about 34% from three. That is a top 190 mark in all of college basketball. It is an IU Indy team that has been okay, but not amazing in terms of taking care of the ball, and at home, they haven't necessarily generated a ton of offense. They're playing very up-tempo. They're 10th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Oakland more around about 68th, but for this IU Indy team, in terms of points per possession at home, outside the top 250, you've been able to have Kyler D'Agostino lead the way with about 19 points. He shoots 38% from three-point range, and then Jackson Edwards, he's been able to give you a little bit of versatility, 11.5 points, pair of assists, 5.5 rebounds per game, but he and Finley Woodyard, he does it all, 6 assists, 5 boards, 9 points per game. Lone two guys on the roster that give you over 4 rebounds per game, and then on the flip side for Oakland, you've got a really, really good floor general in Brody Robinson, and while IU Indy has been able to do an amazing job in terms of generating turnovers, Oakland is a top 45 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, thanks to Robinson. Give you 17 points, 6.5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three, and it is an Oakland team that is in the top 75 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and they've been pretty solid on the inside, top 150 team with that 2-point shooting percentage. They are giving up a lot of second and third chances, but IU Indy is getting absolutely blowtorch on the glass. They're outside the top 335 with regards to rebound percentage, and then you've got a trio of guys for Oakland, Michael Hoagie, Bari Navarula, along with Isaac Garrett, who's give you all between 13 and 14 points per game, with Navarula about a 6 boards, a block per contest, a block, and 7 rebounds out of Garrett. He throws in there 2.5 assists per game as well. Hoagie gives you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Zaire Wells shoots at Wells from 3-point range. He's been able to give you about 40% 3-point shooting with about 9 points per game. In a pressure spot, Oakland does shoot 75% of the free throw line. They're a top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts per game, and I think that that's going to be enough to get the job done on the road, and I think that the way that Oakland guards the perimeter and the increase in turnovers keeps you under, so my total 167.5, like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9, with Oakland made them a 9.5 point favorite. 683, 684. George Mason is going to be on the road facing off against St. Joe's. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's as 1 to 1.5 point home underdogs. 137.5 to 138.5 is the total. I did set a total of a 136.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Have a George Mason team that's playing super duper slow. They are 342nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. St. Joe's more around about 196th, and it's a St. Joe's defense that has been rock solid. They are 73rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They really don't have big home and road splits, so it's been pretty consistent there. George Mason, they're about 85th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so we'll say they're giving up about 12.3 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And for St. Joe's, their strength is on the inside. They've been a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, a top 30 team in terms of shot block rate. Justice Ajabor only gives you about 5 points, 5 boards, but throws in there nearly 2 blocks per game. You have a George Mason team that hasn't been allowing a ton of second and third chances, 88th in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. St. Joe's is actually 215, so they're allowing for a few second and third chances there, but I did set George Mason as a 3.5 point favorite, mainly because the St. Joe's 3-point shooting, even though it's been a little bit better here in conference play, still awful. 334th in the country, shooting 30.4% from 3-point range. Jane Glover has stepped up. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, giving you 14 plus points per contest, but they did lose their top scorer in non-conference play play, and the deuce being loose, Deuce Jones, so that's been an issue. You've got Derek Simpson give you about 13 points, 5.5 boards. Desir Haskins throws in there about 6.5 rebounds per game, and outside of Glover, you've had Haskins and Austin Williford shoot about 35% from three, but those are like the lone three guys on the roster that shoot above 30% from the outside. This is a George Mason team that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of hunkering down low as well. Top 125 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. If you got Corey Mincy in the backcourt, give you about 15 points. He throws in their 3 assists, shoots darn near 40% from three. Jari Long shoots 38% from the outside. Riley Allen patches Bales play with about 6 rebounds per game, and even though Emmanuel Kanga gives you fewer than 5 points per game, he throws in there 5 boards. If they need to be able to hit free throws, George Mason shoots about 73% of the free throw line, and they're a top 30 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. And for this George Mason team, they've actually been able to do a much better job in terms of taking care of the ball at home rather than away from home, and they have become a top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, for George Mason, in games played away from home in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are a top 15 team in the country. So I think that they get the job done. One to lay up to 3 with George Mason, and on that under, sub I total at a 136.5, 685, 686. Illinois State is on the road against Northern Iowa, and Northern Iowa is a favorite here of 5.5 points. 128.5 to 131.5 is the total. It's opened up at a 125, which even I thought that was too low. I did set mine at a 128.5, so now that we're seeing this go up to a 130 plus, I am going to be in on the under, mainly because this Northern Iowa team is playing big, giant, fat slugs right now. In terms of total possessions per game, there are 365 Division I teams, 360th in terms of total possessions per game, and Northern Iowa games just do not feature any sort of 3-point shooting whatsoever. Northern Iowa at home shoots 31.9% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 275 in all of college basketball, and boy, oh boy, do they not allow you to be able to get good looks from 3 either. 5th in the country in opponent's 3-point shooting percentage at 28.5%. Meanwhile, you've got an Illinois State team that's been really good with their defense as well. They're a top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, albeit they're giving up well over 18 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And at home, they allow teams to shoot 26.7% from 3-point range. It goes to 37.2% when they're away from home. But neither of these teams have really given themselves a lot of second and third chances on the glass, and both teams are not giving you second and third chances. Illinois State, 10th in the country in defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing just 23.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Northern Iowa, 20th. They are allowing 23.9% of opponents' misses to become an offensive rebound. I do think that Illinois State has the goods to be able to remain relatively lively, so I'm going to be willing to take the points, mainly because both of these teams have been very rough at the free throw line. Neither team shoots above 70% at the charity stripe. They're both outside the top 260 with that regard, and Illinois State does have Chase Walker down low, 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You've got good ancillary 3-point shooters at Tyree Coleman, Bowden Skunberg. They combine for 20.7 points per game. Both shoot above 41% from the outside, and Johnny Kinzinger still is only shooting about 30.5% from 3, but has been able to give you about 11 points per game. And then on the flip side, for Northern Iowa, you've been able to get a lot out of Leon Bond, the transfer that comes over from Virginia, as he's been supplying the team with about 12 points, 5 boards from 3-point. He shoots about 39% from 3. Trey Campbell, 32% 3-point shooter that throws in their 13 points, 4 assists per game. It's a Northern Iowa team that does a great job in terms of maximizing possessions. They are turning the ball over 9.5 times per game. That's a top 30 mark in the country, and they're pretty solid with their interior offense as well. Top 85 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, but I think you're in for an almighty slog. Again, Northern Iowa not really doing the little things, or a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of offensive rebounds per game and free throws attempted per game, and I think that keeps Illinois State in a low-scoring game to be able to remain lively. So, set my line of 4.5, take it 5 plus here with Illinois State, and I'm in on the under. Sub I total 128.5, 687, 688. Rhode Island is going to be on the road against St. Bonaventure, and Bonaventure is a favorite here of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 143.5 to 145.5 is a total, and I made a total of a 143.5, so 144 plus. I'm in on the under. Rhode Island really slowing down games. They're 296th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. The Bonnies are playing a little bit faster than they have in past years. They're about 223rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for St. Bonaventure, this is a defense that has really hit the skids. They're now outside the top 240 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Rhode Island has been very rock solid with their defense. They're 55th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Could only set this line at 1.5, so now that we're getting to a 2 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with a Rhode Island team that has been supreme in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, this group group is 9th in the country. Now Rhode Island has left something to be desired with their three-point shooting, and Bonaventure is going to have a nice edge there as Rhode Island is outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They themselves shoot 31.1% from three-point range. That is 311th in the country. Meanwhile, for the Bonnies, they shoot 37.2% from three. That is 31st. That does fall off to 36.3% at home. And for Bonaventure, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of controlling games down low with having Frank Mitchell average darn near double-double, 16 points, 9.9 rebounds per game. Daryl Simmons has been a nice scorer with about 16.5 points per contest. He shoots 42% from three. Daniel Igbeniwe gives you good versatility with his 39% three-point shooting, but this team is getting blowtorch down low. As for Bonaventure, outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, hovering around 200th with their own two-point shooting percentage. And for this Rhode Island group, you've got a pair of nice go-to scorers, Tyler Cochran along Jonah Hinton, who have been hitting it hard with a combined about 28.5 points per game. Cochran has been able to be a do-it-all guy with about 5.5 boards, 2.5 steals per contest. He only shoots 30% from three, but Hinton shoots 35% from three. Jamari Tripp shoots 41% from the outside. You'll be able to have a guy in Keaton Idajiri be able to step up, give you about 5.8 rebounds per game. So I love what they bring to the table there. And this has been a Rhode Island team that has been a top 125 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Rhode Island has been outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they themselves give the ball away too much. Rhode Island outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. So even though the Bonaventure defense has taken a big step back, I'm going to be in on the under. I did set my total 143.5, and at 2+, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Rhode Island. 689, 690. You've got Butler on the road against Villanova, and Villanova is a 9.5 to a 10.5 point favorite. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total, and I did set a total here of a 150.5. I do like the over as you've got a Butler team that just has been really looking to push a lot of tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This team is 71st in the country. Villanova playing very slow and controlled, 276th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but second chances should be had in this game. Villanova is allowing teams to grab 30.2% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is 262nd in the country. Butler, in games played away from home, teams are reeling in 32.7% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That's well outside the top 250 in the country, and this has been a Villanova team that has been giving it up from three-point range when they've been at home. They've got a very interesting home and road split. As for Villanova, in their games played away from home, they're allowing teams to shoot from three-point 31.5%. That goes up to 35.9% in their home games. Meanwhile, you've got a Butler bunch as well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They actually do a relatively solid job guarding the perimeter. Teams are only shooting about 33% from three-point range against them, and Butler is a top 65 team with regards to their own offensive rebound percentage, with Michael Ajayi give you 16 points, 11 boards, a steal, a block per contest, so he's tough in the stat sheet, and Finley Bizjack is Bizjacking teams, shooting 35% per three, gives you about 17.5 points per game. I did set my line here at 8.5, so the 9.5, 10, I feel like it's went a little bit too far, even though Villanova is going to be able to stand up to Ajayi down low with their own star rebounder, as you've been able to get a double-double, about 12 points, 10.5 rebounds per game of Duke Brandon, but after Bryce Lindsey was off to such a nice start to begin the season with his scoring down to about 12 points per game now, still shooting the mid-30s from three. Tyler Perkins, he shoots 36% from the outside, 14 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, so they've done a solid job there, and it's a Villanova team that is a legitimately solid three-point shooting team. I'm not going to call them amazing or anything like that, but it's a team that shoots about 35.8% from three-point. That's a top 75 mark in the country. If you look at them specifically in their home games, that goes up to 38.1%, and you've had Arcade and Lewis do a nice job stepping up as well, 12.5 points per game for Villanova. They become a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Butler doesn't generate turnovers, but they also do an okay job taking care of the ball, and with Villanova being outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well, I think that keeps Butler lively in this game. So set a total of a 150.5 like the over, and with Villanova, could only make them an 8.5 point favorite, so going to be taking the 9+ here with Butler. 691, 682. North Texas is on the road against Charlotte, and Charlotte does find themselves as a slim underdog here in a lot of spots of 1 point, in some spots a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. Totals 137.5 to 138.5. Regardless, I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 126.5, but with Charlotte, I did make them the 2.5 point favorite, so if they're a small underdog, going to take them on the money line. If they're laying a point to a 1.5, I will be laying that very small number, as I just can't trust in this North Texas offense when they're away from home. You take a look at North Texas, and away from home, they shoot 23% from three. That's not an exaggeration. That is 365th out of 365 Division I teams, and overall, in terms of points per possession away from home, 337th. Well, they're playing at a very slow and controlled pace. Both of these teams are. Charlotte, they're the slower of the two teams, 331st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. North Texas, they are a little bit faster, but they're still at 265th, but this has been a North Texas team in which the defense has traveled really well. They are 11th in terms of points per possession allowed away from home, second in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis away from home. Teams shoot less than 30.5% from three-point range away from home against them as well, so that does hurt a Charlotte team that they've been a good three-point shooting team at home at 38.3%. You've got Anton Boinke. He's the 7-footer that comes over from Providence, and he's been able to do a nice job, give you a little bit of versatility. Throws in there about 10.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. Ben Bradford, Desai Mingo have been your top two scorers. They give you combined about 25 points per game. And Mingo, 38% three-point shooter, 4.5 assists per game. It has been a Charlotte team that has been turning the ball for quite a bit. They're outside the top 230 in terms of ball security, turnovers on a per possession basis, and they themselves outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers. So that'll help out North Texas a little bit. You've got a bunch, though, in Charlotte that has been pretty solid on the inside, top 150 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, on the flip side for North Texas, you've been able to have this team do a nice job pulling in their second and third chances. Top 55 team with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Jashawn Stevenson has been that go-to scorer, 17.5 points. He gives you 2 assists, 2 steals per contest. They've been without Will McClendon all season long, so David Terrell has had to be the man to step up. 13 points, gives you about 4.5 assists per game, but I mean, you really don't have anyone on the roster right now other than Kamai Crosby, who's been giving you 3 points per game. That shoots above 31% from three-point. If they're in a pressure spot, they only shoot 70.4% at the free throw line, and it's a team that as well is right around about 300th in the country with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Hard to trust in something like that, and while North Texas does a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, they've been getting blown away on the glass as well in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound and games played away from them. They allow 35.1% of those misses to become an offensive rebound. Charlotte, they themselves are in 51st in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and just with the lack of shooting of North Texas, I do think that Charlotte gets the job down here, whether it's as a small favorite or a small underdog in on Charlotte here, and like the under, semi-total 126.5, 693, 694. Mercer is going to be on the road against West Carolina. Western Carolina is a 1.5 point home underdog. 160.5 to 161 is the total, and I'm in on Mercer. I did set them as a favorite of 4.5 points. With Western Carolina, they've been able to clean up a lot of the turnover woes that have plagued them over the last few years, but they're still outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Meanwhile, you've got a Mercer team that has been halfway decent in terms of generating some turnovers on defense. They're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, the forte of this Western Carolina team is down low. They are a top 100 team in terms of percentage of missed shots that do become an offensive rebound. It is a Mercer team that's giving up a lot of second and third chances, 274th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. It is a Western Carolina team that they're only allowing teams at home to grab about 19.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is a top 20 mark in the country, but they are a bottom 10 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and it's a Mercer squad that has been able to do a pretty solid job from the outside. They shoot 35.3%. That is a top 100 mark in the country, and I think that that's really going to be able to help them out in this game, as Baraka Okoji has been so good for this Mercer team. He's doling out over 4.5 assists per game, throws in there 19 points from three-point. Only shoots about 32.5% for three, but Quentin Perkins is shooting 39% for three. Armani Mighty has been able to give you a pair of blocks per contest as well, and for a Western Carolina team that isn't necessarily shooting it the best from three-point range, it is going to be tough to square off against a Mercer team that as well, even though they give up a lot of second and third chances, they're also a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. For Western Carolina, right now they're shooting about 36% from three-point range at home compared to more like 32.5% away from home, so you do see a nice positivity there. You've got Court Sainsbury, who's been able to give you 13 points per game. I like the way that you've been able to have some of these guys like Abdul Fantakaba, even though he doesn't give you a lot of scoring, be able to step up on the boards. He's been able to supply this team with about 6 or 7 rebounds per game. You've had Marcus Kell be really that do-it-all sort of guy with about 13.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, but his team also doesn't do a great job of getting to the free throw line. When they do, they shoot only about 70.5% at the free throw line. And for Mercer, this is a team that's going to be looking to push tempo, while Western Carolina has honestly sold themselves down a little bit, about 129th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Mercer, they're a top 175 team in terms of total possessions per game, up to about 132nd, so they've been speeding up just a little bit, and I do think that with this Mercer team, they do find a nice job in terms of being able to control things from the outside. And for this Western Carolina team, also of concern, out of your top 6 scorers right now, only 2 of them shoot above 70% at the free throw line. So that Mercer is a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I made my total of 158.5. So at a 159 plus, I'm going to be in on the under. 695, 696. Wright State, they hope to be the right side on the road against Purdue Fort Wayne. And Purdue Fort Wayne is a home underdog of 2.5 points. Throw on this game 149 to 150.5. And with IPFW Fort Wayne, I did set them as a underdog here of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Wright State. Wright State has been able to do a really nice job in terms of their three-point shooting, as they're shooting over 35% overall this season, and they go up against the Purdue Fort Wayne team that has been absolutely terrible in terms of guarding the arc. 353rd in the country, with opponents shooting 37.8% from three-point. And for Wright State, their road three-point shooting is what's really impressive. 39.3%. It actually is much better away from home rather than at home. Fort Wayne has been absolutely terrible on the glass as well. well. They're 363rd in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Wright State team that maybe they're not supreme on the glass, but still, you've got Michael Abaraje, who's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with about 6.5 boards, 12 points per game. The ancillary pieces have been really good three-point shooters as well. So you've got a pair of guys, Solomon Kagler and Dominic Pangonis, who have been able to combine for 19 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 38.5% from three. Michael Cooper, 13.5 points, shoots 34.5% from three-point range. And it's a Wright State team that's either here nor there with either generating turnovers or taking care of the ball themselves. And it is a Fort Wayne team that they're looking to win the battle in terms of a turnover front. They're in the top 50 in terms of both generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense and in terms of taking care of the ball themselves on offense. And they've been a solid 36% three-point shooting team. That's the top 100 mark in the country, with Corey Adnock supplying about 20.5 points, shoots 37% from three. Fort Wayne, a relatively mid-tempo team at right around about 190th in terms of total possessions per game, so neither here nor there. But right now, you've got one player on the roster that gives you over 4 rebounds per game, Darius Suffy, with about 4.5 boards per game. Now, the next two scorers outside of Adnock, DeAndre 3000 Craig, along with Mikhail Stevenson, they combine for about 28.3 points per game, and they combine to shoot about 37% from three-point range. But I do think that in this spot, Wright State is going to be able to do a much better job down low. I think that Wright State is going to be able to generate a few turnovers away from home, and I think that they get the job done, and they're able to take this game over with their three-point shooting. So semi-total at a 150 here at the 149. I'm going to be in on the over, and with Wright State, I did set them as the 6-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay that number, 697, 698. Omaha is going to be on the road against South Dakota. South Dakota is a home underdog of 1 to 1.5 points on this game between 156.5 to 157, and with Omaha, I did set them as a favorite of 1.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay 1 and not a half a point more. You've got a South Dakota team that's absolutely looking to gun it. In terms of total possessions per game, they are 27th in the country. Omaha, very much more of a mid-tempo team. They're about 173rd, and both defenses are rough. For South Dakota, they're outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions per game. Same goes for Omaha, and Omaha was dealing with some injuries to begin the season, but now they're fully healthy. The Miami transfer and Paul DeBoge has been able to give the team a nice boost. Since returning to the roster, about 19 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 43% from 3 for an Omaha team that overall this season has been a top 75 team with their three-point shooting percentages. They're shooting just a hair above 35.5%. That goes down to 34% away from them, but they should be able to find some good looks against a South Dakota defense that, well, it's not been great for them to say the least. And it's a South Dakota team that is taking much worse care of the ball this year than they were a season ago outside the top 200 in terms of ball security. Now, Omaha, not generating any turnovers whatsoever. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but for the South Dakota team, they just have had all sorts of issues in terms of being able to hold teams down with regards to their perimeter play. They do have the best rebounder in this game, as they've got a true 7-footer in Cameron Fens, who's done a nice job supplying about 15 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, but the Bruns burner, Isaac Bruns, has been out the last 9 games. He's their top scorer, gives you about 21 points per game, and that's a big reason why I did have to set them as an underdog. You do have Jordan Crawford, still give you about 36% three-point shooting, but outside of that, you just don't know what you're going to be able to get out of some of these ancillary pieces, like Isaiah Butin has been able to give you about 12 points, 3.5 assists per game. With the absence of Bruns, he's really had the ball in his hands quite a bit more. And for South Dakota, this is a unit that has been a top 175 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage, and they do a nice job in terms of pushing you off the three-point line, but even with having teams pile drive the ball inside, they're outside the top 320 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well. And it's an Omaha team that has been a top 100 team in terms of making those two-point shots. Now they're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well. So do think that you're going to get a bit of a higher scoring game here. So I told 157.5. I like the 156.5, 157 to the over. Out with Omaha, I'm willing to lay up to 1 with them. 699, 700. You got Northern Kentucky on the road against Cleveland State. Cleveland State, a home underdog here of 7 to 7.5 points. Draw this game, you're going to be getting this at a 162.5. And with Northern Kentucky, I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cleveland State. It is a Cleveland State team that shoots really well from three-point range. Right now, they are converting on 38% of their triple tries. That is 20th in all of college basketball. And you've got a Northern Kentucky team that, in games played away from home, they're a top 50 team with their two-point shooting percentage. Away from home, they also shoot about 30.7% from three-point. So you have a few issues there. And for Cleveland State, not the world's worst three-point shooting defense. Meanwhile, you've got a Northern Kentucky team that they're just not very good in terms of guarding the arc. They're allowing teams away from home to shoot 37.9% from three-point. That's outside the top 300 in the country, as it's a Northern Kentucky defense that is, for lack of a better term, gambling for turnovers. turnovers. Right now, they're overall 41st in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. If you look at games played away from home, they actually ascend into the top 15 with that regard, and they do have a guy in LJ Wells who should be able to do a nice job down low. He's been supplying you with between 7.5 and 8 rebounds per game. He gives the team about 14 points per game. Bonaventure, 18.5 points, 4 boards. Sam Kresinger is up to about 16 points per game. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and then your main three-point shooter, Khalil Robinson, 39.5% three-point shooter, 14 points per game. These 4 guys have all been rock solid, but right now you've had, in the case of Robinson, a little bit of injury on his front. Should be good to go in this game, but that's something to note, and outside those main 4, you don't necessarily get a ton. And then on the other end, you've got a Cleveland State team that's had Trey Beard do a really good job stepping up, shooting over 40% from 3-point. She gives the team double figures, and for Cleveland State, you don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding for the team as they're outside the top 10 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but they were dealing with injury to begin the season to Josiah Harris. He's out giving you about 9.7 rebounds per game. Deion Nasai has been able to chip in there about 6.5 rebounds, 15 points per game. And then with Jaden Lipscomb having his versatility, 13 points, shoots 80% of the free throw line, shoots 42% from 3. And Cleveland State being a top 100 team in terms of free throw shooting percentage at 75.5%. You do have a bunch in Northern Kentucky that with their pressure style and the way that they're trying to generate turnovers, they are putting you on the free throw line quite a bit. That does leave Cleveland State to remain lively in this game. Should get a nice up and down game with Northern Kentucky 73rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Cleveland State is right there at about 63rd, and Cleveland State well outside the top 10 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Do feel like we've gone perhaps a little bit too far with this total, though. I did set my total at a 163.5. This opened up at a 163.5. Now that we're coming down to a 162.5, that does become my buy point on the overs. I do think that it's close enough for late bells, and I'm going to be willing to take those points as well, with Cleveland State made them a 5.5 point dog. 7-1, 7-2. Florida is on the road against Texas, and Texas, they are back to being a underdog here of 6.5 points. Toss game between 157.5 to 158.5, and with Texas, I set them as an 8.5 point dog. I'm going to be one away of Florida. Florida is right now your number 1 team in all of college basketball in terms of rebound percentage, and to the credit of Texas, they've been a pretty solid team in terms of not allowing second and third chances, but that's really going to be put to the test here, and you've got a really good team on the flip side with regards to their defense in Florida, who's ranking right now 21st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Texas, in terms of percentage of missed shots, become an offensive rebound for opponents. They're 23rd in the country, with only about 24% of opponents' misses becoming an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, for Florida, even though they still don't have a lot of backcourt play, they're well outside the top 320 with their 3-point shooting percentage. They've done a better job in terms of taking care of the ball. They're back inside the top 220 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, as Boogie Flan has still been a disappointment with 11 points, 3.5 assists, but shoots just 20% for 3. But Urban Klofzar now shoots 40% for 3. He's a double-figure scorer with about 10 points per game. Xavier Lee is sort of that point guard, 4 assists, 11.5 points. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but adds versatility. And then Thomas Ha has led the way with 17 points. Shoots 35% for 3. He and Klofzar are pretty much the lone 2 guys on the roster that shoot above 27% from the outside. But Ruben Chinyelu, 11.5 points, 11.8 rebounds per game. I just don't think that there's anyone on Texas that's really going to be able to hold up down low against them. Now, for Texas, you've been able to get really good versatility out of Volkatis, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. And Dalen Swain, he does a bit of everything. 3.5 assists, 2 steals, 18 points, shoots 34% from 3, but Trayvon Marketing only shoot about 30% from 3-point. It's a Texas team that's been very good at getting to the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in the country in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. For Texas, they have been very vulnerable with regards to their interior defense, though. They've been outside the top 50 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, strong on the inside. They're a top 50 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, and also allowing teams to shoot about 36% from 3-point. And for Florida, I do think that they're going to be able to win the battle on the glass. Texas does not force any turnovers whatsoever outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and I do think that helps Florida get the job done. I do think that with the way that Florida just does not allow second and third chances themselves, that they're going to be able to help you keep this total under as well. So by total 154.5. I like the under. And with Texas, I set them as an 8.5 point dog, so I'm going to be willing to lay of Florida. 703, 704, you've got Wofford on the road against East Tennessee, and East Tennessee does find themselves as a favorite here of 8 to 8.5 points. So on this game, it is 151.5, and with East Tennessee, so there is an 8.5 point favorite. So 8 is my max lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it as you've got an East Tennessee Tennessee team that has been very stout on defense, top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, in the top 65 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and you're just not going to get second and third chances against these guys. They're allowing teams to grab only about 24.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's a top 50 mark in the country. Meanwhile, you got a Wofford team that hasn't been too bad here as well. They're allowing teams to grab about 27.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That's a top 130 mark in the country. And for Wofford, they do now have their top scorer back in Kamari Holmes. He was missing for 6 games. He's up to about 19 points. He's 34% from three-point range. And then you've got Niles Malchowski, who's been really that nice number 2 guy, shooting 37.5% from 3, 16.5 points per contest. But what you're going to be able to get out of some of these other ancillary pieces is a little bit TBD. Brian Sumter has stepped up to be able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. It's a Wofford team that is outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They take great care of the ball. They're a top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They're outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers on defense. And for East Tennessee, they should be able to find good looks against a Wofford team that's outside the top 325 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And ETSU, about a country average team with their three-point shooting percentage at 34.5%. Much better on the inside, top 75 team with their two-point shooting percentage, as you've been able to have Mr. Brian Taylor lead the way with 14.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. And then you've got a pair of other guys in Cam Morris and Blake Barkley that combine to give you 28.5 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 36% from 3, and they give you a combined about 11 rebounds per game. For East Tennessee, they're also a top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. I do think that they're going to do a nice job controlling this game, and neither of these teams are looking to push a lot of tempo. Wofford 214th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For East Tennessee State, they're even slower at 275th, and to think that East Tennessee's defense wins out here, so I'm going to be willing to wait with the ETSU. Made them an 8.5 point favorite, and I'm in on this total under semi total 144.5, 7-5, 7-6. You've got St. John's. They're going to be on the road against UConn, and UConn does find themselves as a favorite of between 4.5 to 5.5 points. So on this game, 145.5 to 146.5, and I do like the over. Semi-total 147.5. Recognize that this is a UConn defense is in the top 35 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. St. John's has been stout on defense, and with UConn, they're a relatively slow team, 262nd in terms of total possessions per game. St. John's looking to crank it up quite a bit more. They're 25th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and strangely, it's been a St. John's team that has been a bit better with regards to their outside shooting when they've been away from home rather than when they've been at home. For St. John's, right now, they're shooting 37.8% from three-point away from home. That compares to 31.2% at home, but they are giving up a lot of second and third chances on the glass. In games played away from home, St. John's outside the top 190 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now you've been able to get a lot of production out of your main two big men, Zubiedja for 16 points, 7 boards. He doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but he's able to pop it from 3. And then Dylan Mitchell, 8.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. These are also your top 2 facilitators. Nobody else gives you more than 2.3 assists per game. That's a little bit of an issue, even though St. John's has been able to win the turnover battle. They're a top 45 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. On defense, on offense, they're a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball. I still do think that that's going to be a lingering concern, and it's not necessarily a great shooting team. They're outside the top 140, the St. John's team is, in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for UConn, they haven't necessarily been able to get solo ball goaling. He's been able to shoot only about 30.5% for 3, but still gives the team 14 points per game. You've got Terrace Reed down low, should be able to do a nice job in this matchup. 13.5 points, 7.5 boards, pair of blocks per contest. Silas Emery does a bit of everything, 6.5 assists, 4.5 boards, 11 points. He shoots 43% from 3-point. And for UConn, you're in conference play. They've been shooting 38% from 3. That leads the conference. They lead the conference in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. They've been absolutely bludgeoning teams on glass. They don't necessarily grab a ton of second and third chances, but still they're a top 50 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, and his team ranks in the top 30 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that this is going to be a game close enough for late fellas, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be in on the over. I did set my total at a 147.5, and with UConn, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. Made them a 5.5 point favorite. 707, 708, you've got Detroit, and they're going to be on the road against Robert Morris, and Robert Morris does find themselves as a favorite here of 8.5 points. Starting on this game, it is 150.5, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Detroit. As I did set them as a 5-point underdog for Detroit. Their 3-point shooting to begin the season was just absolutely atrocious. In non-conference play, they were shooting in that neighborhood about 30% from 3-point range. Ever since conference play has began, they've really been atop of the Horizon League with this regard, shooting 40.9% from 3-point range in their 18 Horizon League games. and TJ Nadeau has been the big reason why. Shoots 47.5% from the outside, 13 points, only about 3 rebounds per game, but Orlando Lovejoy does a nice job in terms of giving this team a little bit of everything with 14 points, 3.5 assists. Doesn't necessarily give you a lot of 3-point shooting or anything like that, but that's why you've got Tyler Spratt, who's now shooting 38.5% from the outside. He throws in their 10 points per game. Legend Geeter has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, and for Detroit, they are very vulnerable on the inside. They're outside the top 270 with regards to both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they're also doing a very solid job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. They've been a top 65 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now they run into a Robert Morris team that has been even better. They are right now grabbing 36.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is 11th in the country, and this has been a Robert Morris team that has really been able to find their stroke from three-point range. Right now for Robert Morris, they shoot 38.2% from three-point range. Overall, that is 13th in the country. That goes to 40.8% when they're at home, so that's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. And for Robert Morris, you do have a pair of guys that should be able to do a nice job in terms of owning the glass here, as you've got Nicolas Shadakoulis, who's been able to supply about 11.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Deshaun Good, well, he has been very good, 15 points, 8.5 rebounds. He shoots darn near 60% from three-point, and then Ryan Prather has been able to throw in there about 15 points per game. Alberto Vargas to give you about 4 assists per game, but it is a team that has been turning the ball over a ton. For Robert Morris, they're outside the top 260 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. If they do find themselves in a pressure spot, they also only shoot about 69.5% at the free throw line. That is well outside the top 240 in all of college basketball. For Detroit, they actually shoot 76.9% at the free throw line. That is a top 40 mark in the country with the way that Detroit is able to match the second and third chances that Robert Morris is getting. And this being a little bit of a tempo war, Robert Morris in terms of total possessions per game, 252nd in the country. Detroit, they are about 115th. I do think that Detroit going to do a nice job in terms of holding in this game. So I did set my line at 5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Robert Morris, and I did set my total out of 151. I think that the amount of made threes and that's coming down to late game fouls is going to be just enough for the over. So like the over and the points here with Detroit, 709, 710. You got Vanderbilt. They're going to be playing us at Georgia, and Georgia does find themselves as a underdog here of 8 to 9 points on this game. It is 165.5 to 167, and for Vanderbilt, I did set them as a favorite here of 8.5 points. So at the 9+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Georgia. It is a Georgia team that still has been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers. Top 65 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now they are giving up way too many second and third chances on the glass. This is a Georgia unit that is 338th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Over 33% of opponents' missed shots do become an offensive rebound. And for Vanderbilt, you always talk about the offensive, rightfully so. They're a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're a much better team on the glass than I think a lot of people want to give them credit for. They are a top 100 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. It's a Vanderbilt team that as well has been really good in terms of guarding the arc. Now Georgia is outside the top 225 with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage, but that said, for Vanderbilt, they're allowing teams to shoot just 20.8% from 3-point range at home. That is a top 30 mark in the country for Vanderbilt. They have been dealing with a few injuries, though. You currently are dealing with the ailments to both Duke Miles along with Frankie Collins, so that does take quite a bit out of the backcourt. Tyler Tanner, though, along with Tyler Nickel, so Tyler squared, have been able to step up in the interim. For Nickel, 14.5 points. He shoots 43% from 3. Tanner shoots about 37.5% from 3. 5 assists, 2.5 steals per game. And then down low, you've been able to get right around about 6.5 to 7 rebounds per game out of Devin McLaughlin, who throws in there 10 points per game. Jalen Washington, he gives you about 5.5 rebounds per game. But one thing that this Georgia team has done a really good job of is shot blocking. Even though they're getting dump trucked with regards to rebounding, they are leading the country in terms of shot blocks per game, with Samatu Surreal throwing in their 2.5 blocks, 10 points per game, even though he gives you no scoring whatsoever. Justin Abson, about 4 boards, 3 points, and 1.7 blocks per game. And then Jeremiah Wilkerson is just all over the floor for this team. Nearly 2 steals, 17 points, shoots 34.5% from 3. Marcus Millender has been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range himself. I do think that that's enough for this Georgia team to remain lively, as they've done a nice job on the inside. They're a top 40 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. They're about a country average team in terms of guarding the 3-point line. Again, their own 3-point shooting percentage, not necessarily amazing, but it is a Vanderbilt team that could be at a little bit more on the inside, and Vanderbilt is outside the top 70 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They just haven't been the same team here in SEC play with all the injuries, and I think that that's enough for Georgia to remain in what I think is going to be very much an up and down game. Georgia is just top 5 team in terms of total possessions per game. Vanderbilt is a top 35 team. I did set a total as a result at a 166.5, between 165.5 to 167. I personally would rather have the 165.5 to the over, so looking at that over, and I'm going to be willing to take 9+ with Georgia. 7-11, 7-12. Maryland is on the road against Nebraska. Nebraska ball is a favorite of 17.5 to 18.5 points. 141.5 to 142.5 is the total. And for Nebraska, I did set them as a favorite of 19.5 points. So between 17.5 to 18.5, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And with Nebraska, they do a great job in terms of making things all about 3-point shooting. As for Nebraska, they're a top 25 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 3-point range, and they're also a top 25 team in terms of percentage of their own shots that come from 3-point range. And Maryland, they're allowing teams to shoot 37.5% from 3-point range. That is 347th in all of college basketball. It's a Maryland team that has been able to get a little bit of production out of David Hewitt from the outside. He's shooting over 35% from 3-point range. With the injury to Farrell Payne, he's really had to step up, be that top scorer with about 14.5 points per game. Also shoots 86% at the free throw line. But Maryland as a whole, they're shooting about 32.5% from 3. They're outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. They're doing a nice job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Top 100 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage, and that's one thing that Nebraska does not do. In terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, Nebraska is about 293rd in the country. Meanwhile, for Maryland, who I was mentioning before, they're up to 84th in the country, but even with Solomon Washington doing a nice job down low, give you about 8 boards per contest. I just still don't trust this team on the inside because they're also outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage and outside the top 270 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I like what Rick Mass brings to the table for Nebraska. He's right now supplying you with about 14.6 boards, 3 assists per contest. Bryce Sanford from 3-point range is shooting about 41%. Jamarcus Lawrence is shooting 38.5% from 3-point range. And it's a Nebraska team that they feel right at home with their 3-point shooting. They are a team that ranks in the top 30 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis for Nebraska. Right now they're shooting as a team from 3-point range about 35.8%, and with Nebraska being a team that does a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, top 30 team in terms of few turnovers on a per possession basis, I think that they really control this game. And if Maryland looks to push them on the inside for this Nebraska team, they're also a top 25 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. So I did set my line at 19.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Nebraska. I did set a total here of a 143.5. I think that Nebraska is just efficient enough to be able to get you the over, even though they're a lower tempo team, 249 in terms of total possessions per game, as Maryland just giving it up from 3. So I'm going to be willing to lay it with Nebraska, and I do like this total over as well. 7-13, 7-14, Davidson on the road against Duquesne, and Duquesne does find themselves as a favorite of 2.5 to 3 points total on this game, 142 to 143, and with Duquesne, I did set them as a favorite of 2.5 points. So 3+ does become my point on Davidson. The biggest thing with Duquesne is that they're just too sloppy with the ball, 264th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and if you look at their home games specifically, this actually falls outside the top 300. Meanwhile, Davidson, more around about 173rd, neither here nor there, and it's a Davidson team that has been able to shoot it quite well from 3-point range. Davidson is 32nd in the country, shooting 37.1% from the outside. That ascends up to 39.5% away from home. That is a top 10 mark in the country. It's a Duquesne team that's been very good on the inside. They're a top 50 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, neither here nor there in terms of their 3-point shooting, and it's a Davidson team that away from home, they allow opponents to shoot only 29% from 3-point range. That's a top 20 mark in the country. And Duquesne, at home, teams shoot 36.2% from 3-point range against them. That is a big, giant issue. Now, for Davidson, you really don't have that, shall we say, go-to guy, as you've got Robert Blums right now supplying about 12 points per game. Josh Govins and Parker Fredrickson, they both give you about 10.7 points per contest. And for Fredrickson, he shoots 45% from 3-point range. And it is a Davidson team that they shoot 66% at the free throw line. That is legitimately a bottom 20 mark in the country. Even though they shoot so well from 3-point range, they're up there, and they are outside the top 190 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. So Duquesne should be able to get some buckets on the inside. It is going to be a little bit of tempo, whereas Duquesne is looking to play fast, 61st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Davidson 357th, but I think that the efficiency does get you over. I did set my total at a 145.5, so I'm in on the over, especially with Duquesne having Jimmy Williams and Terrence Gunyard in the backcourt combining for about 32 points per game. They combine to shoot about 37.5% from the outside. John Ugley has been dealing with injury, but he's been able to come back. He's only now give you about 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Has not been himself here in recent games. They've been putting him on a big giant minutes restriction, but in his absence, you've had David Dixon be able to supply about 5 rebounds per game. Jacob Nieses, he throws in their 5.5 boards and actually shoots 44% from 3. And again, if you need to trust them at the free throw line, they shoot just 71.5% of the free throw line. Not amazing there, but I do think that with the way that Duquesne should be able to find buckets on the inside and Davidson controls things around the perimeter, that you do get a higher scoring game. I'm in on the over, so I told 145.5, and at 3+ taking the points with Davidson. 7-15, 7-16, Belmont is going to be playing up to Evansville, and Evansville is a massive underdog here, as you're going to be catching with them 19.5 to 21 points, 149.5 to 115.5 is the total, and with Evansville. I did set them as an underdog of 21.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for this Belmont team. One of the biggest issues for them has been turnovers. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, this team checks in 286th in the country. Evansville is even worse at 331st. Now, the good news for Evansville is that they also have a Belmont team that shoots less than 70% the free throw line. So that'll help them out a little bit, but still, Connor Turnbull, who was leading the way with 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, he's been dealing with an injury over the last few weeks, so he's probably not going to be able to play in this game. Leaf Mahler has been able to give you about 4 assists, 10.5 points per game, but Evansville really lacking anything. In terms of their offense, they're outside the top 240 as well in terms of their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, and it's not like this has been an Evansville team that has been great on defense. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, they are well outside the top 225 with that regard. Overall, Evansville is just 309th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And I will say for Belmont, they actually allow 9.5 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. They're still overall a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are going to have to match up with Joshua Hughes, who's been able to give you 9.5 points, does shoot about 37.5% from 3, and you've been able to have AJ Casey step up for about 12 points per game, but Belmont should be able to certainly win that battle on the offensive front as they're a top 10 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 39.5%. Tyler Lundblade, 40% 3-point shooter, shoots 93% of the free throw line, gives you 16 points per game. He's the top guy in this game, and then Drew Skronowski has been able to throw in there about 6 boards, pair of assists, 11 points per game. Sam Mormay, 12.5 points. He shoots about 36% from the outside, and they've had to find a new facilitator. Nick McLean being out of the fold. Skronowski has been a little bit of a point forward for the team, and additionally, you've been able to have Jack Smiley do a nice job, give you about 10 points, 3 assists per game here in conference play. He's a 38% 3-point shooter, even though Evansville has been able to do a okay-ish job on the inside. They are a team that is also giving it up from 3-point range right now for Evansville. They're allowing opponents to shoot over 36% from 3 outside the top 300 in the country, and that should allow Belmont to be able to win this game very convincingly. Semi-line at 21.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Belmont, and I like the over. Semi-total at a 153.5. 7-17, 7-18. You've got Tulsa on the road against Tulane. Tulane is a 4.5 to a 5-point home underdog. Total on this game, 154.5 to 155.5. And I did set Tulsa as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. With Tulsa, this has just been such an efficient offense all throughout the season. They're a top 13 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I'm not going to call them an amazing defense, but they're a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Tulane is about 157th, but if you look at games played at home for Tulane, that falls outside the top 185, and Tulane has just been worse at home rather than on the road in so many different respects. For the Tulane team, they're shooting only about 30% from 3-point range at home compared to over 35.5% when they're away from home. If you look at just their points scored on a per possession basis, this is a Tulane team that in their home games specifically, they fall outside the top 275 with this regard. They're about 217th overall, and they're just not grabbing second and third chances. Tulane is grabbing 19.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is a bottom 15 mark in the country. Dover Brumba, who's giving you 19 points, 5 boards, trio of assists, shoots 35% from 3. Curtis Williams shoots about 35% from 3-point range. He's supplying you with about 12 points per contest as well, but it's a team that's just been leaving a lot to be desired with regards to their offensive play when they've been at home. They're about a country average team with regards to both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, but I do think that Tulsa, who's been able to shoot well above 39% from 3, going to be able to find some nice holes in this defense. David Green gives you 16 points. He's shooting 39.5% from 3. Miles Barnstable shoots 42% from the outside, 15 points per contest. Hyland Riley, 4 assists, 14.5 points per game. It's a Tulane team that is not going to be able to generate a lot of turnovers on a bunch that is in the top 85 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. For this Tulsa team, they're a top 25 team in terms of free throws made on a per possession basis, and they shoot 78.5% at the free throw line as well. Country average team with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, but I do think that Tulsa, a relatively mid-tempo team, is going to be able to go on the road, get the job done here. I did set my total at a 154.5, 155 plus. I like the unders. I don't think that Tulane does their part with the total, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Tulsa. Made them a favorite of 8.5 points, 719, 720. It is Sanford. They're playing host to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a underdog here of 7.5 to 8 points. So on this game, 136.5 to 137.5, and I set my total 139.5. I do like the over. You got a Sanford team that has been a relatively mid-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game, 199th in the country. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh is more around about 344th, but it's not a Pittsburgh team that's necessarily doing a great job with regards to their defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is a group that they check in well outside the top 200 in all of college basketball, and they don't shoot it well at the free throw line either. They shoot about 67% at the charity stripe. That has been really rough for them. Meanwhile, it's a Sanford team that's been a little bit wobbly with regards to their own defense as well. overall, they sort of gamble for turnovers. They're a top 75 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Overall, 108th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Pittsburgh, I'm not going to say that they've been able to get some great three-point shooting out of this team, but it's been respectable, as you've got DeMarco Minor, who's been very major for this team. Right now, he's up to about 9 points, 3 of assists. He shoots from 3-point, 35.5% from 3. Cameron Corrin, 12.5 points, 7 boards. He shoots 37.5% from the outside. Brandon Cummings, he's been coming around with about 12.5 points per game, and it's a Pittsburgh team that has been doing a much better job with regards to the outside rather than the inside. Now, I will say they are a top 125 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they've been a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so not a lot of second and third chances for Sanford, but it's right now a Pittsburgh team that's outside the top 225 with their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. And for Sanford, you've got Abuko Corey, who's been absolutely incredible all season long, as he's right now supplying the team with over 21.5 points per game. Now, he doesn't shoot it amazingly from 3-point at 33%, but throws in there 3.5 assists, 2.5 per contest. Benny Geeler has been able to Geeler on 10.5 points. He shoots 40% from 3-point. Jeremy Dent Smith has been able to give you some nice contributions as well. It's a Sanford team that they're also very weak with regards to their interior play, as they're outside the top 250 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, so that could be a little bit of an issue here. I did still set them as a 7.5 point favorite. I think that 8+, it just gets up a little bit too lofty in a game where neither of these teams are necessarily great with regards to their interior offense or defense. And with the Sanford team, while they've done a nice job in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, they have been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They are a team that they've been just very lackadaisical in terms of giving it up from 3. Teams are shooting over 33.5% against them, and I think that keeps Pittsburgh lively and keeps us close enough for late fouls. So I did set a total of a 139.5. I like the over, and at 8+, I'm going to take the points with Pittsburgh. 721, 722, you've got Drake, and they're going to be on the road against Valparaiso. And the Drake does find themselves as an underdog of 4.5 to 5.5 points, 147.5 to 148.5 is the total. And for Drake, I did set them as an underdog of 3.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now, it's a Drake defense that has been not so great, to say the least, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is a unit that does find themselves well outside the top 240 with that regard, but they've actually been significantly better when they've been away from home. This does improve to 152nd in the country, and you've got a Valparaiso team that has been not able to knock down shots inside the arc all season long. 355th with regards to 2-point shooting percentage at home. They're overall 256th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, they also do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc, as for Valparaiso, top 75 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and it's a Drake team that they are built around some really good 3-point shooting, as they're about a country average team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Jalen Quinn has led the way with 17+ points per contest, shoots well from 3 for a Drake team that has been shooting about 34.5% from the outside, with Quinn shoots about 36.5% from the outside. And then you've got Jashawn Thomas, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game. To the credit of Drake, they do a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 65 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but for Drake as well, they've also been giving it up quite a bit from 3-point. They're outside the top 300 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. We've been having the injury to Wilkins Exacte hurt them down low as well, but Oku Frederico give you about 9 points, 5 rebounds per game. He should be able to help this team remain lively against a Valparaiso team that gives you all of D's, Owen D's, who gives you 13.5 points, shoots 40% from 3. Brody Whitaker has become a 40% 3-point shooter, and for Valparaiso, they shoot about 33.5% from the outside. In terms of their home games, this goes up to about 35% from the outside, and in a pressure spot, they shoot about 70% of the free throw line. That is outside the top 240 in the country. They take care of the ball for Valparaiso, top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and for Valparaiso, I do think that they're going to be able to come up with some second and third chances. Top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentages. You've been able to get about 6.5 rebounds per game. JT Pettigrew, Sean Tapula throws in there 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but I just don't trust them to cover this number with their just overall lack of ability to shoot. So I did somebody a total out of 141.5, like the under, and at 4+, take the points with Drake. 723, 724. You've got Youngstown State. They're going to be on the road facing off against UW Milwaukee, and Milwaukee just find themselves as a home underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. 149.5 to 150.5 is the total, and with Youngstown State, I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points, so I'm going to be one to lay the number. You just have a Milwaukee team that you can't trust in their metrics too much because they've been dealing with so many injuries this season. They do have Faison Fields, one of their main big men back. He's been able to do a solid job giving the team right around about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. Aaron Franklin has been out there all season long, 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but their top scorer in Seth Hubbard is still out. He was giving the team 16+ points per game. Danilo Jovanovic, 12.5 points, 6 boards. He's been out since like the beginning of the month of January. Amar Uyagard does give you about 13 points per game, and he's going to be good to go in this game. But Chandler Jackson has been dealing with injury as well. It's just been a big giant mash unit for a team that is outside the top 10 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, for this bunch, they've been able to do a nice job taking care of the ball. They're a top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and for Youngstown State, their main kryptonite has been turnovers. They're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and when they don't turn it over, they're a top 125 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 35.5% and a top 50 team in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, and UW Milwaukee is getting blasted in both. They're outside the top 320 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and they're caroling all the way as Youngstown State has Chris Carroll give you 17.5 points, 5 boards. He shoots 40% for 3. Rich Rolfe has been at 37.5% 3-point shooter for this Youngstown State team. They've been able to do an okay job in terms of guarding on the inside. Top 150 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Can be at a little bit more around the outside, but for UW Milwaukee, they're ranking outside the top 270 with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage. UW Milwaukee still a top 100 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they're not allowing teams to grab a ton of second and third chances. But again, with all the injuries, I do think that a Youngstown State team that is a top 135 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage has some success, goes on the road and gets the job done. Semi-total at a 149.5, so one to lay with Youngstown State, and at a 150 plus, I'm in on the under. 725, 726. Rice, we give our own to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They're going to be playing those to South Florida. South Florida is an 11 to 11.5 point road favorite. Throughout this game, 156.5 to 157.5, and with Rice, I did set them as a underdog here of 6.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. You've got a Rice unit that has not been good with their 2-point shooting percentage. You're outside the top 325 with that regard, but it is a team that has been able to find some success around the outside. They're a top 135 team with their 3-point shooting percentage, and South Florida is about 253rd with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Line teams to shoot over 35% from 3. Nick Anderson has been rock solid for this Rice team from the outside. 15.5 points on 40% 3-point shooting. Jalen Smith, 37.5% 3-point shooter. He gives you 12 points per game. Trey Barneau, a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 16 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists. Now, Rice has had a turnover issue. They're outside the top 200 in terms of ball security, and South Florida has been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers, and South Florida is going to be looking to crank this thing up tempo. They are leading the country in terms of total possessions per game. Rice, more of a country average team, 184th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for South Florida, they are going to have the most dominant big man in this game, as you've had a double-double out of Isaiah Nelson with 16 points, 10 boards, throws in their block and Apricotis, Wes Enos, along Joseph Pignon. They combine to shoot about 38% for 3 between the two of them, 30.5 points per game, but overall South Florida, about 224th in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage, just a hair above 33%. They've been okay in terms of taking care of the ball, and they are a top 175 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Their main forte is being able to guard on the inside, and Rice, they're not looking to do a lot of that. I do think that Rice is going to be able to do an okay job in terms of holding in this game, win this game from around the perimeter, and Rice is a top 55 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. South Florida is a top 15 team with this regard, as well as they've been able to get some relatively good production with right in that neighborhood of about 5 rebounds per game out of Joshua Majafo to help out with that. So I think that you get a higher scoring game. I like the over. I did set my total at a 160.5, and I'm going to take 7 plus here with South Florida. 727, 728. East Carolina is going to be on the road against UTSA. Meet the Roadrunners find themselves as a home underdog here of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 151.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 148.5. I like the under for East Carolina. They're looking to play fast, but not necessarily breakneck pace fast. 109th in terms of total possessions per game. UTSA, they've been about 121st in terms of total possessions per game. Neither of these teams are great on offense, and neither of these teams are great on defense. As a matter of fact, you take a look at the 3-point shooting. UTSA, 353rd in the country, 363rd with East Carolina, but I'm going to be willing to lay with East Carolina mainly because they've got by far the top scorer in this game, as on the flip side for UTSA, Jameer Simpson, who supplies you with about 14.5 to 15 points per game, is the lone guy on the roster. That gives you double figures. Meanwhile, Jordan Riley, 23.5 points, 5.5 boards, doesn't shoot it well from 3. As a matter of fact, Dimitri Gardner, lone guy on the East Carolina roster, shooting above 29% for 3s, up to 44% from the outside with about 11 points per game, but even with that, it's an East Carolina team that has been a better team on the glass. With East Carolina, they're a top 225 team in terms of overall rebound percentage. UTSA as well outside the top 325 with this regard. And for East Carolina, they're a top 235 team with regards to both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been able to have some good, shall we say, contributions out of Giovanni Amaruju, who's been able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game as well. And for UTSA, you just haven't been able to have that main guy down low. As right now, you've been getting about 5.3 rebounds per game out of Bubakar NJ, one guy on the roster, gives you over 5 rebounds per game. UTSA outside the top 330 with regards to both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. East Carolina's outside the top 20 with their own 2-point shooting percentage as well, but they should be able to get tons and tons of second and third chances against a UTSA team that's in the bottom 10 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. For UTSA, they're outside the top 240 in terms of ball security. They don't generate a lot of turnovers. Their metrics are just a big giant sea of red in East Carolina, even though they have so many, shall we say, issues with regards to perimeter offense. I do think that they get the job done here in a game where I think that sloppiness and missed shots cost you the over. Somebody told 148.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with East Carolina. Some 29, some 30. Georgia Southern is going to be on the road against James Madison, and James Madison does find themselves as a favorite here of 5.5 to 6 points. So on this game, it is 154.5, and with James Madison, I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with them. It's a James Madison team that has not generated any turnovers whatsoever. That's led to them being outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But while Georgia Southern has a nice leg up in terms of generating turnovers, they're a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're not an amazing 3-point shooting team, as right now they're shooting 31.8% from the outside. That is outside the top 290 in all of college basketball. James Madison has been more of a top 150 team. James Madison has a pair of guys in the backcourt that I really like in Cliff Davis along with Bradley Douglas, who combine for about 27 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 36% for 3, and Justin McBride, 16 points, 5.5 boards, 40% 3-point shooter. Eddie Ricks has been able to do a good job down low with about 6 boards, 7.5 points per game. You've been able to have Gab Newhoff be able to step up in a big way with about 8 points. Doesn't really give you a lot of 3-point shooting, and for James Madison in a pressure spot, they do shoot only about 70% of the free throw line, but they've been pretty good with regards to their interior defense as well. They're a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for Georgia Southern, this is a group that they've been right around about 200th with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, and just here outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And they're just allowing way too many second and third chances. Even though James Madison has not necessarily been a great team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they should be able to find a few here against a Georgia Southern team that's allowing teams to grab 32.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, James Madison, they're more around 129th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Have to like what you're getting out of various Spud Webb, a long time or more in the backcourt of Georgia Southern. These two guys have been combining for about 31.5 points per game, and Moore just shoot 36% from 3, and then Nick Cavey and White, 9.5 points, 3 rebounds per game. But the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, Alden Applewhite, he gives you about 13 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. I just don't know if that's enough in this spot, and both of these teams are neither great nor terrible with their free throw shooting percentage, where Georgia Southern shoots about 72.8%. The charity stripe, James Madison, 70th. And for Georgia Southern, to their credit, they take care of the ball, top 100 team. There's a few turnovers on a per possession basis, but do think that James Madison, with the way that they're stronger on the inside, finds a way to be able to persevere here. Somebody total at a 154.5. So right now I'm seeing between 154 to 154.5, 154, my max 5 point on the over to go along with laying up to 6 here with James Madison. 731, 732. Indiana State is going to be on the road against Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is a favorite here of 8.5 to 9 points on this game, 146.5 to 147. And for Southern Illinois, I made them a 7.5 point favorite. So going to be willing to take the points with Indiana State. Now, it's been a less than tremendous year for Indiana State, as for this group, right now they are giving up a lot of second and third chances in games played away from home. 33.1% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and overall they're 287th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but away from home, that doesn't send back in the top 200. And for Southern Illinois, this is a bottom 20 team in the country with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They're 289th in the country in terms of points per possession, and if they need to cover this game at the free throw line, there's no trusting in them being able to do so. Kelron House is a lone double-figure scorer for this team, 15 points, 3 assists. He only shoots about 23% from 3 now. Damian Mayo has been a 40% 3-point shooter with 8.5 points per game, and Roland Salajibi, albeit it's on low volume, shoots 39% from 3, 10 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and then his brother Prince Alajibi has been able to throw in their 5+ rebounds per game. But these are the lone 2 guys that really give you 5+ boards per contest. For as much as this team is looking to be able to just run things through the inside, they're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. They're outside the top 165 with regards to both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And Indiana State has great Scott, as Ian Scott has done a nice job giving this team right around about 13.5 points, 6.5 boards. He shoots 38.5% from 3. Derek Vorse is up to shooting about 40% from 3 now. He's dealing with a little bit of injury, probably going to be out the full once again in this game. Xavier Hall is giving you about 4.3 assists per game, and Indiana State has been very good on the inside. They're actually a top 35 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. For Southern Illinois, I mean, it's not like they've been awful with regards to their interior defense, but you expected maybe a little bit more, and at home, they allow opponents to shoot 53.7% 47% from 2-point range. That is actually well outside the top 250 in all of college basketball, with Southern Illinois not being a trustworthy team at the free throw line, as both of these teams are rough. You've got Indiana State at 67.8% at the free throw line, 67.3% for Southern Illinois. Both are outside the top 315. I do think that Indiana State holds in this game, so I set my line at 7.5. Well, they take the points with Indiana State. Did set a total of 147.5, so at a 147 or less, also in on the over. Some 33, some 34. Louisiana Monroe is on the road against South Alabama. South Alabama is a 14.5 to a 15-point favorite. Toss game 153.5 to 154.5, and with Monroe, I did set them as an underdog of 19 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with South Alabama. South Alabama just really forces you to take a bunch of threes. In games played at home, they are forcing opponents to take 67.9% of their field goal attempts from three-point range. No other team forces more than 53.2% of opponents' field goal attempts to come from three-point range, and Monroe, they're shooting only about 32.5% from three-point range away from home, and it has been dipping, as they were actually a halfway decent three-point shooting team to begin the season. That has just fallen off a cliff, and for Louisiana Monroe, you've been able to have a pair of guys, and Martavius Russell, Christian Lewis, do a nice job in terms of leading the offense with a combined 33.5 points per game. With Lewis, he throws in there about 3.5 assists, a steal per contest. Russell is able to give you about a steal and a block per contest, and Lavelle Brodeau, he's up to 8 boards, 15 points per game. But that said, you just have a very top-heavy team in general. You don't have a single guy other than Brodeau on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, and that's critical because South Alabama, they do force you to take a lot of shots from three, and they are going to give you a lot of second and third chances in terms of defensive rebound percentage. This is a South Alabama team that right now is checking in 292nd in the country, but Monroe's outside the top 300 with regards to offensive rebound percentage, and for South Alabama, they actually look to be able to just push the ball inside. They're a team that doesn't take a lot of threes, and they take great care of the ball. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, albeit they do shoot 66.5% of the free throw line, but Chaz Harris, 19 points, 4.5 boards, 5 assists. You've had Adam Olson be able to shoot about 38% from the outside, 16 points, 4 boards, and for Stephon Williams, he's been able to contribute about 4.5 rebounds per game, with this being a Monroe team that has been not good with their interior defense. They are outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that South Alabama going to be able to dictate the terms of this game. It's a South Alabama team that's going to be looking to play slowly, 270th in terms of total possessions per game. Monroe looks a gun at 49th in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that South Alabama is going to be able to slow this game down, get exactly what they want, and get the job done. So I did set my line at 19. I'm going to be willing to lay it with South Alabama, and I like the under. Semi total at a 150, 1.5, 735, 736. Texas A&M is on the road against Arkansas, and Arkansas does find themselves as a favorite in most places, right around about 7.5 to 8.5 points total on this game. You're getting that anywhere between 169.5 to 170.5, and I did set my line at 7.5. So A+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Texas A&M. It's a Texas A&M team that's done a great job in terms of generating turnovers, top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and this is an Arkansas team that's a top 25 team in terms of protecting the ball, but A&M has been able to do a nice job with regards to perimeter defense away from them, and they themselves are able to shoot it well from three, 36.8% from three-point range. That is a top 45 mark in the country, and Arkansas, they at home shoot 40.1% from three-point range. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. And for Texas A&M, their home and road splits with their perimeter defense are actually very wild. A&M right now, line teams to shoot 28.3% from three-point range away from home. That goes at 35.4% at home, so I think that might iron out a little bit, but even if it does, you still have Rashawn Agee, who's going to be able to control things down low. He's done a nice job giving the team right around about 14 points, 9 rebounds, pair of assists per contest. Ruben Dominguez has done a solid job in terms of being able to supply 11 points. He's your main three-point shooter at about 42% from the outside. Ryland Griffin has also been able to shoot about 42% per three, gives you about 11 points per game. For A&M, other than Agee, you don't have a single guy that gives you over 11.2 points per game, but it's very much as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of collective with this team, with Pop Isaacs being able to step up, give you double figures here in conference play. And for Arkansas, this has also been a really good perimeter defense, as well as right now they're allowing teams to shoot from three-point range just a hair above 30% overall for the season. They are checking in at 43rd in all of college basketball, and at home that goes to about 30.6% from the outside. You've had a pair of freshmen do a really nice job, and Darius Acuff along with Billy Thomas lead the way, with Acuff 22 points per game, shoots 44% for three. Thomas shoots 41% from the outside. Acuff 6 assists per game. For Arkansas, they're actually a top 5 team in terms of few turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're still executing well on the inside. Top 50 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage that can be really had on the inside, with being outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, even with having Malik Ewan be able to give the team right around about 9 points, 5 rebounds per game. And Trevon Brazil, with all of his great versatility, 12.5 points, 7 boards, he shoots about 34.5% from three. I do think that A&M is going to be able to hold in there. I do think that A&M's going to start to give up a few more open looks from 3-point range away from home, and it should be a very much an up and down game. Arkansas, 30th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. A&M, they are 15th, so I did set a total here of a 171.5. I'm going to be willing to take 8 plus here with Texas A&M, and I do like the over. So my total 171.5, 737, 738. You got Mississippi State on the road against Alabama, and Alabama does find themselves as a 14.5 point favorite. 174.5 to 175.5 is the total, and I do like the under. So my total 168.5. Now, I recognize that Mississippi State is looking to gun it, 48th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and obviously Alabama is going to as well. Alabama's third in terms of total possessions per game, and Mississippi State, they've actually done an okay job in terms of guarding the 3-point line. 58th in the country in terms of bonus 3-point shooting percentage. Alabama in their home games, they attempt about 58% of their field goals from 3-point range. That is a number one mark in all of college basketball, but I do think that for Mississippi State, they're going to get blown away in this game mainly because they're not going to be able to keep up with the overall 3-point shooting of Alabama, even if it is a little bit more muted in this game. As for Alabama, overall, they shoot from 3-point range about 35.7%, actually falls to 35.5% at home, but Mississippi State, they're right now shooting 32.2% from 3, 271st in the country. It's just all about Joshua Hubbard at this point, who's been one of the better scorers in all of college basketball. Right now, he's given the team right around about 22 points, 3.5 assists, shoots 34.5% for 3, and Jabari McGee is a 39% 3-point shooter, gives you about 8 points per contest, but you don't have a lot down low for the team, and typically that's a forte of Mississippi State. You've got Okoro, Quincy Ballard, who combined for 12.9 rebounds per game, and Ballard has been able to give you a block per game, but Mississippi State not putting you under duress. Really, both of these teams are outside the top 350 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but also for Mississippi State, they are outside the top 300 with regards to their free throw shooting percentage, outside the top 135 with regards to both their 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Alabama, even without Charles Bediako in that situation, you've still got some relatively good low post play out of Omari Allen, who's been able to give you 12 points, 7.5 boards per contest. Aiden Terrell has good versatility with about 11 points, 6 rebounds, and then LeBaron Fideland shoots 39% from 3. I do think that Alabama might be a little bit off with their 3-point shooting, but even if they are, they're still a top 35 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. It's an Alabama team that gives up a lot of second and third chances, but not a Mississippi State team that has been able to do the same job on the glass that they have been in the past. So I do think that that leads to an under, so I told 168.5, and with Alabama willing to lay it, I set them as a 16.5 point favorite. 739, 740. DePaul is going to be on the road against Creighton, and Creighton does find themselves as a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. 141.5 to 143 is the total, and with Creighton, I did set them as a favorite of 4.5 points, so 5 plus does become my buy point on DePaul. Is it a ball team that's not giving you a whole heck of a lot of offense? 242nd in the country. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they shoot about 31% from 3 points away from home, and it's a Creighton team that's much better with their offense when they're at home rather than away from home. For Creighton, they shoot 36.8% from 3 points at home, 32.7% away from home, and for this Creighton group right now, they're supplying about 16.9 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home, but I do think the DePaul defense that's currently 57th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis keeps them alive in this game. It's Creighton. Right now, it's 233rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and outside the top 250 in specifically their home games. And you've been able to have Josh Dix do a nice job in terms of stepping up for Creighton. He's done a very rock-solid job in terms of giving you about 12 points per contest, and that's been big because Austin Schwartz has really been their top scorer here in conference play, but he has been dealing with a lot of injury recently. He's only been able to give the team a combined 8 points in the last 2 games. I don't know what's happening with him, but there's a big drop-off there, and that's big because he's shooting 39.5% for 3. That's the best mark on the team. Nick Graves has been able to give you about 10 points, throws in there about 4 assists per game, and it's a Creighton team that they both do a nice job in terms of protecting the ball with about 11.5 turnovers per game, and they don't force any turnovers on you. They're outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're a okay team with regards to interior defense, top 150 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They really give it up from the outside, so that hurts a DePaul team that really doesn't have a lot of 3-point shooting, though you've been able to get a little bit more recently out of Caleb Banks, who shoots 36% from 3. CJ Gunn is your top scorer with about 14 points per contest, but NJ Benson, 7.5 boards, 11 points per game. Landon Blocker, 11 points, 3.5 assists, 1.7 steals per game. It is a DePaul team that has been able to force the issue. They've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're good on the inside top 50 mark with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And though this is a DePaul team that's outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, Austin Schwartz just being in and out of the lineup, I think that helps this DePaul team remain live, and I think that helps out with the under as well. I set my total 142.5. Right now I'm seeing 143s out there. Personally, I would rather have a 143 or so to the under rather than a 141.5 to a 142 to the over, with the way that Creighton has been just hit or miss with regards to their offense, and DePaul has locked down on defense, so I'm going to be in on the under, and I like 5+ here with DePaul, 741, 742. You've got Seattle. They're going to be on the road facing off against Pepperdine, and the Waves of Pepperdine are a 5.5 to a 6-point home underdog. Total on this game, it is 146.5 to 147.5, and with Pepperdine, I did set them as a underdog here of 6.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with Seattle. Seattle has not been a good offensive team. They're outside the top 290 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Relatively mid-tempo team. They're about 153rd in terms of total possessions per game, but with Pepperdine, they've been a team that just has not been able to execute on offense. They are well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and with this Seattle team, at the very least, they're just so rock solid on defense. Right now for Seattle, 22nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Pepperdine is 304th. Now, one thing Pepperdine does a solid job of is they really don't put you on the free throw line too much, and you do have a guy in Danilo Dosic who's got good versatility at 6'10". He only gives you about 2.5 rebounds at 6'10", but 11.5 points, does shoot 36% for 3. Aaron Clark up to 39% 3-point shooting with about 15.5 points, 2.5 assists per game, and then Sal Phipps, 13 points, 6 boards, 5 assists. He's been able to do a pretty solid job there, but it is a Pepperdine team that has had a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Seattle, top 25 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, all while being a top 60 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And they've got, in my opinion, the best overall shooter in this game, and Braden Maldonado, 14 points, shoots 72.5% free throw line, 36.5% from 3. John Chrysophilis, he's been able to shoot about 36.5% from 3-point, in a little bit more of an ancillary role than he has been in past years, but has been able to do a nice job in terms of contributing there. And then additionally, you've got Will Hembright, who's been a good shot blocker, 2.5 blocks, 5 boards, 12 points per game. John Suckio has been able to do a solid job in terms of contributing as well. I do think that this is going to be a game where you're going to have a lot of dead possessions. I think that Seattle is really going to tighten up the screws on defense. I think that they're going to have a tough time scoring themselves, so I'm very much in on the under. I did set my total here at a 134.5, and with Seattle, I made them a 6.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be one to lay the number. 743, 744, you got LSU. They're going to be on the road against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss does find themselves as a 1.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 146.5 to 148.5, and with Ole Miss, I did set them as a favorite here of 5 points, so I'm going to be one to lay the number. Just no De'Don Thomas is really hurting this LSU team. He was their main facilitator, giving out over 5 assists per game. He's been banged up all season long, and for LSU, you've been able to get some good production on Max McKinnon with his versatility. 14.5 points, 2.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game, shoots about 39% from 3, and LSU has honestly been a relatively solid offense, even without necessarily great 3-point shooting. LSU is still 45th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they shoot less than 33.5% from 3-point. They've been able to do so because they do a nice job in terms of coming up with second and third chances, and they've been able to take care of the ball, as LSU is not a team that generates turnovers on defense. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but that said, on offense, they've been able to do a solid job in terms of being a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on offense, but this Ole Miss team has been even better. This Ole Miss bunch is 21st in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. AJ Storr has been able to shoot in the high 30s from 3, gives you between 13 and 14 points per game. Now they're going to have their issues down low with Markel Sutton and Michael Nwoko, who combined for 13 rebounds per game, and for Ole Miss, they're well outside the top 225 with regards to overall rebound percentage, but it's now an LSU team that's starting to give up second and third chances as well. They have found themselves well outside the top 225 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that for Ole Miss, they're going to be able to get a good performance out of Malik Dia, who's done a nice job stepping up, give the team a little bit over 6 rebounds per game. He's a double-figure scorer, and additionally, you've been able to have nice production out of Peyton Prickens from the outside, about 9 points per contest. He shoots 43% from 3-point. Ole Miss at the free throw line, they're shooting about 74.5%, so if they need to close it out there, they are capable of being able to do so. For Ole Miss, it's been a team that's been country average in terms of generating turnovers, and they themselves, again, are getting dump trucked down the glass, but that De'Don Thomas injury, I think, is going to be very costly to LSU, and I do think that with the late game fouls, you do have this Ole Miss team getting the job done, and in my opinion, it just stays under the total. It is a Mississippi team that, in terms of total possessions per game, has been looking to slow down at about 203rd, and this LSU team just not as efficient with Thomas out of the fold. So, semi line of 5, I'm going to be willing to lay with Ole Miss, and I like the under. Semi total at a 147, 745, 746. Portland is on the road against Gonzaga, and Gonzaga does find themselves as a 26.5 to a 27.5 point favorite. So, this game 149.5 to 150.5, and with Gonzaga, I did set them as a favorite of 26.5 points. So 27 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Portland won this game outright on the money line a few weeks ago on their home floor. I don't think that Lightning is going to be striking twice, especially with Portland having a rough time in terms of taking care of the ball. They were 338th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's a Gonzaga team that has been able to do actually an amazing job with their defense. The question has become with them the offense. As for Gonzaga, they're up to the top 30 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They lead the country in fewest points allowed on a per possession basis at home. Now, you do have a Portland team that's been a top 100 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Much of that success has come at home, and they're still dealing with the injury to Timo George, your number 2 scorer. So Joel Foxball is giving you 16 points, 4 boards, 7 assists, shoots 32% from 3. He's going to need to do it all. Makayo Balu has been able to shoot 35% from 3, 9.5 points per game, but for Portland, they're shooting 30.3% from 3. That's outside the top 320 in all of college basketball. They're also a team that gives it up from 3-point share outside the top 320 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Country average team with regards to being able to guard inside, and for Gonzaga, the 3-point shooting has been very suspect for them recently. They're just a hair inside the top 200 with their 3-point shooting percentage. Davis Vogel in a higher volume has been cooling down a little bit. You saw Mario Saint-Sapri shooting 44% from the outside, 8.5 points per game, but it's pretty much Graham Ike and not a lot else with Braden Huff out of the fold. He's been giving you 20 points, 8.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game, and then Ty and Grant Foster, well, he does a nice job in terms of giving you a lot on defense, a steal, a block, 11 points, 5 rebounds per game. He's not necessarily a great 3-point shooter, but even with that, Gonzaga is still a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Both of these teams are going to be looking to fly at Portland, but are in 7th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Gonzaga group that is still right around about 66th in the country. I do think that Gonzaga atones for the previous loss. I just don't think that they're going to be able to cover quite this big of a number, but I do think that the offense, with just the amount of possessions that you get in this game, is going to be able to do just enough to get you over. So I'm going to take 27 plus here with Portland, and I'm in on the over. So my total at a 152.5, 747, 748. UNLV is on the road against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is a 7.5 to an 8-point favorite total on scheme, 152.5 to 154. And with UNLV, I did set them as a underdog here of 11.5 points. I'm going to be one to lay the number. It's a UNLV team that has been very rough with their defense. 263rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Doesn't send to the top 240 when they're away from home. And Grand Canyon, they are 32nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This was a game that was played a few weeks ago where UNLV got the job done, but very nearly blew a 15-point lead in the final 2 minutes. And because he had craziness in the final 2 minutes that went over, I don't think that Lightning strikes twice here. Grand Canyon, solid in terms of generating turnovers, top 115 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And UNLV in their games played away from home has actually been a top 75 team with this regard, but it's also a UNLV team that has been quite suspect with their offense. They're outside the top 140 with regards to their overall points scored on a per possession basis. Even with Dre Gibbs Lawhorn going into Inferno mode, 20 points, 2.5 assists. He's shooting about 41% from 3-point range. You've got Isaac Williamson, who's been a nice mixer and shaker with about 9 points, a steal per contest. And for UNLV, this team as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% for the outside. Country average mark, they give it up from 3-point range. That's the worst part of this defense. They allow you to shoot about 36% from 3-point range outside the top 275. And for Grand Canyon, they're not a great 3-point shooting team either. They shoot 30.4% from 3. That's outside the top 320 in the country, but they do a nice job in terms of being able to control the boards. They're a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. And now it is a Grand Canyon team that's outside the top 330 with regards to own ball security, but I love the versatility of Nana Wusu Nane, 9.5 points, 8.5 boards. He throws in there a steal and a half per contest, shoots 36% from 3. If I had Brian Moore Jr. give you more, he shoots about 36% from the outside as well. And for this Grand Canyon team, while they are a team that they're still very much a work in progress on offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they check in about 158th in the country. They are averaging about 11.6 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. They've also had Jaden Henley be able to supply about 17.5 points per game, and it's a team that's solid at the free throw line. They're shooting 75.5% at the free throw line, and UNLV, a top 10 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. I think the Grand Canyon gets revenge and gets the job done in a lower scoring game. So my total at a 147.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number here with Grand Canyon, 749, 750. You've got the Ohio State University. They're on the road. They're facing off against Iowa, and Iowa is a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 141.5, and with Iowa, I can only set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take 6 plus here with Ohio State. Now for Iowa State, they're dealing with the injury to John Mobley. He was giving them 40% 3-point shooting, and number 2 scorer at 15 points per game, but still have Bruce Thornton, who's been able to shoot in the high 30s from 3-point range. He's giving you 20 plus points per game, and I think that Ohio State is going to be able to remain lively in this game because of the way that they're doing the little things. Ohio State has been a good perimeter defense. In games played away from home, teams shoot only about 30.5% from 3-point range. That's a top 50 mark in the country. It's an Iowa team that has been a little bit vulnerable on the inside. If you're going to look to attack this Iowa defense, you want to do so down low. They're outside the top 185 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Iowa has been very much feasting on turnovers. They're a top 25 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So having Thornton out there means that Ohio State, who's been a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, should be able to keep things clean. For Ohio State, they're a top 30 team with their 2-point shooting percentage as well. Very much a whole is greater than some of its parts approach with regards to rebounding. They don't pull in there a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but your top 4 remaining players with Mobley out in terms of Thornton, Devin Royal, Christoph Tilly, Amari Bynum, they all give you at least 4.6 rebounds per game, and with Royal, he's been able to give you a little bit of 3-point shooting while throwing in there a pair of assists per game. A little bit of a top-heavy team with Brandon Noel, also deal with an injury, but I do think that for Iowa, it's a little bit top-heavy with them as well, because you've got a team that ranks in the bottom 5 of the country in terms of total possessions per game, and yet Bennett Stearns gives you 20.5 points per game. That's more like 23 to 24 points per game on a normal tempo team, but he sometimes has to do it all by himself. Shoots about 39.5% from 3. Now, Davion Banks shoots 45% from 3, 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Cam Manny Woo's been able to throw in there about 4.5 boards. Alvaro Fogurius, 8.5 points, 4 boards. But I do think that with the way that this Iowa team really operates, and they've been a very efficient team, they're a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but the way that their defense feasts on turnovers, the way that they do allow some looks on the inside, I do think that Iowa is going to have a little bit of issue with regards to the interior play of Ohio State, them being able to drive the ball inside. I do think that that keeps Ohio State very lively in this game. So I did set a total here of a 141.5. Right now, seeing some 142.5 pop up. That's my buy point on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Ohio State. 751, 752. We've got Colorado. They're going to be playing against Kansas State, and Kansas State does find themselves here as a underdog of 6.5 to 7 points. 161 after 162.5 is the total line for Colorado. I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points. So 7 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Kansas State. It's a Kansas State group that honestly has been able to do a really good job with regards to both their perimeter offense and perimeter defense away from them. Now they're well outside the top 10 with regards to rebound percentage, as right now PJ Haggerty is the lone guy that gives you 5 plus rebounds per game, but they do shoot 36% from 3-point range at home. On the road, that actually goes up to 37%. And then with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, Kansas State at home, they're allowing teams to shoot 36% from 3-point range, 30.4% away from them. But as we know, you no longer have Jerome Tang in there, so you're under an interim coaching regime of Matthew Driscoll, which, if you recall, when he was at North Florida, it seems just took 100 million threes and they didn't do anything else. Now Colorado has done a nice job taking care of the ball. They're a top 100 team in terms of just points scored on a per possession basis. They're a top 50 team in terms of taking care of the ball for a Colorado State team that's outside the top 270 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. It's refreshing that they go up against a bunch of Colorado that doesn't force any turnovers whatsoever, but that said, for Colorado, they're still going to have the edge on the inside with regards to Nate Johnson. He gives you about 12 points, 4.8 boards, 4.5 assists per game, so a little bit of versatility there, but he's the only guy other than Haggerty that's really been able to give you a lot of rebounding. Taj Manning up to about 4.5 rebounds per game himself, and then David Castillo does shoot about 37.5% from 3-point range. It's a Colorado team that is very much giving it up from 3-point range. Colorado's allowing you to shoot 37% from 3. They're outside the top 320 with their country average team with their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but they're doing a much better job on the glass as they've been able to get right around about 6.5 boards out of Bengo Doc, who's been able to throw in there about 11 points per game. Sebastian Renick is give you 12 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Barrington Hargress continues to shoot 50% from 3. He's up to 14 points per game. Isaiah Johnson has been able to shoot about 38.5% from the outside. He's up to 16 points per game. If Colorado needs to cover at the free throw line, they shoot 75.5% at the free throw line. Just with everything that's happened with Kansas State, you no longer have that interim coach bump because now things are a little bit more normalized for them. I do think that this Colorado team does go out there, get the job done, but I do think that the 6.5 is pretty much a max here at 7 plus. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Colorado State, and I do like the over. I did set my total at a 162.5. 753, 754. You've got SMU on the road against Cal, and Cal is a home underdog here of 3.5 points. So this game 161.5 to 162.5, and I do like Cal on the money line. I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. You got an SMU defense that's just not been great. They're outside the top 140 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, it's an SMU team that's been very good with their offense, or a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. For SMU, they overall shoot 37.9% from 3 points, but that does go down to about 34.8% away from home, and it's a Cal team that they themselves have been a really good 3-point shooting team, as right now for Cal, they shoot from the outside 38%. That does actually go down to 36.7% at home, but I'm still willing to take a shot on them on the money line. It's a SMU team that has been giving up a lot of second and third chances, even with having down low the gentleman from Turkey and Samat Yedoglu supplying about 10.5 points, 8 rebounds per game, and Kevin Miller, I can't call him Boopy, but he boops teams shooting about 41% from 3, about 18.5 points, 7 assists per game. Love what he brings to the table. BJ Edwards is a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 13 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 2.5 steals per game, and then Jerron Pierre has been able to supply you with about 17.5 points per game as well. But for this SMU team, they are allowing teams to really gash them on the inside. They're outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. For SMU, just giving up the second and third chances that they do, it's going to be an issue against a Cal team that does the little things well. Cal is a top 30 team with regards to both fewest turnovers on a per possession basis and in terms of their free throw shooting percentage as well. And then you've got Day Ames giving you 17 points, shoots 39% for 3-point. John Camden, 42% 3-point shooter, 14.5 points, 6 boards per contest. Now, Lee Dort is the lone guy on the roster for Cal. That gives you over 5 rebounds per game, 7.7 boards out of him, and he's been dealing with a lot of injury here recently, and I think that he's going to be out once again. But that said, Chris Bell, who comes over from Syracuse, he's able to give you 13.5 points. I think that he can step it up on the boards, and you've had Milo Selic in the interim with Dort being out, being able to give you a little bit more down low, with Cal doing just a little things very well. And this being a Cal team that only allows you to shoot about 30.5% per 3, that's a top 40 mark in the country that the SMU is going to have a tough time on the road in this spot. So did set Cal as a 2.5-point favorite. Like them on the money line. Did set my total at a 160.5 because I do think that Cal guards the 3-point line relatively well. So I'm also in on the under. 755, 756. San Diego is on the road against Oregon State. Oregon State is a favorite here of 6.5 points total on this game. 143.5 to 144.5. And I made Oregon State the favorite of 7.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the 6.5 for San Diego. They've been a supreme team in terms of generating turnovers, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. This team is actually 29th in the country, but for San Diego, all sorts of things have went wrong for them. Obviously, they no longer have their coach in Steve Lavin, and for Steve Lavin's team, they were a top 40 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, along with Lavin being out. Tyler Johnson, who is their top scorer and main facilitator with about 14.5 points, 4.5 assists per game, he decided to leave the program as well, which means that you've got a team that's based around really their backcourt play without their main scorer and their main facilitator, and they've only got one guy on the roster, that'd be Asane Diop, who gives you 4.8 rebounds per game. That's giving you over 3.5 rebounds per game, so they're just going to get flattened on that side of things. Meanwhile, you do have an Oregon State team that, well, they're not great on the glass either. They don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but they do have a nice home court advantage. You've been able to get quite a bit of production out of Josiah Lake, who's done a bit of everything with about 4 boards, 4 assists, 13 points, shoots 38.5% per 3, and it is an Oregon State team that has been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their 3-point shooting, and they're shooting 36.4% from 3-point range at home. Overall, they're about 94th in the country. For San Diego, this group is shooting more around about 34% from the outside, but 37.8% at home, 29.2% away from home. They just have been a team that has not traveled very well all season long. You've got Joan Munch for this Oregon State team that gives you about 5 boards, 7.5 points per game, as ESC is up to about 10 points per game. And Oregon State has had an issue with regards to turnover front. Outside the top 220 in terms of ball security on offense, on defense, they are right around about 300th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but now with no longer having Tyler Johnson, who is also giving you about 2 steals per game, and with this being an Oregon State team that is a top 125 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, I think that that's big. You still have Ternari Lane, Juan Sebastian Godacito for the San Diego team. They combine for about 21.5 points per game. They combine to shoot about 41% from 3-point range. You've had Adrian McIntyre step up with about 10 points, 2.5 assists per game, but I do think that the San Diego team, who's had a tough time taking care of the ball themselves, they don't do a great job in terms of getting to the free throw line. They're going to have a tough time here with Oregon State, and I do think that their offense going to be very impacted by all the losses that they have sustained. So I did set my line here to where I set Oregon State as a 7.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I do like this total over as well. Somebody total 145.5. I do think that's close enough for some late fells. 757, 758. Utah State is on the road against San Diego State. San Diego State, a 1.5-point favorite. Pick them in some spots. So on this game between 146.5 to 147.5. I made San Diego State the 1.5-point favorite. So seeing the pick 'em lines out there / them laying a point, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Both of these seems great in terms of generating turnovers. San Diego State is 28th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis generated on defense. Utah State, in games played away from home, are a top 5 team in terms of generating turnovers, and Utah State is going to have an advantage down low. They're a top 40 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. In games played away from home, they're in the top 10 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. MJ Collins gives you 18 points, shoots 38.5% for 3. Love the versatility of Mason Flosloff with about 16 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, shoots 41% from 3. Kobe King has been the king of shooting 43% from 3, but let's say that you get out of a pressure spot for Utah State. They are shooting just 70.8% at the free throw line. That's outside the top 225 in the country, and while Utah State has been a pretty solid 3-point shooting team, they're also going to give it up a little bit from 3-point range as well. Right now for Utah State, they're allowing teams away from home to shoot 35% from 3-point range. You've got a San Diego State team that at home they're allowing you to shoot more around about 32.5% from 3-point range, and it's a San Diego State team that's been dealing with injury, but You've got Miles Bird and Reese Dixon-Waters, the constants for this team, combining for about 23.5 points per game. Your main three-point shooter in BJ Turner-Davis, he shoots about 38% from three, gives you about 10.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest. Magoon Gwath is now back as well. He's been playing very limited minutes and only played 5 minutes against Colorado State. So I think that he probably plays in this game, but if he does, it's going to be very limited. So that has been factored in. But even without him, you've got Farrell Compton, who shoots 74.5% on the inside with about 8 points per game. It's a San Diego State team that has been playing a little bit more up-tempo this year than in past years in terms of total possessions per game, 87th in the country. But keep in mind, they play that triple overtime game against Boise State. They play that double overtime game against Troy. So that very much warps the numbers. And Utah State is a mid-tempo team, 187th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But for this San Diego State team, they've also been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their interior defense. They're a top 40 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. In a pressure spot, they shoot 75.8% the free throw line. I think that they do just enough to get the job done here. And with San Diego State turning the ball over 12 plus times per game, I do think they get sloppy and both teams turn the ball over tons. So I'm going to be in on this total under. So I told 141.5, and I'm willing to lay a point / take San Diego State as a pick'em. 759, 760. St. Mary's is going to be playing against Santa Clara. Santa Clara does find themselves as a underdog here, 4.5 to 5.5 points. 151.5 to 152.5 is the total for St. Mary's. I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points, so I'm willing to take 4+ with Santa Clara. Santa Clara has been really good in terms of grabbing second and third chances, 19th in the country in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and for St. Mary's, they're not going to be allowing too much of that. Top 5 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and for St. Mary's, they've got very interesting home and road splits with regards to their three-point shooting, as for St. Mary's right now, they're shooting at home a little bit over 40% from three-point away from home. That goes down to less than 33% from the outside, but I think that irons out a little bit more. In Santa Clara, they have not necessarily been the world's greatest three-point shooting team this year, but that does go up to about 35.5% away from home. Santa Clara, meanwhile, they're a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. St. Mary's is allowing teams at home to shoot just 29.1% from the outside, but Santa Clara does have the guys to be able to stand up to St. Mary's down low. Andrew McKeever gives you 9 rebounds per game for St. Mary's. Paulius Marsoukas, 17 points, 8+ rebounds per game, but when you've got a guy that just specializes in rebounding like Jake Emsinger with about 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, that's big. You've been able to have Alan Graves do a bit of everything, 11 points, 6.5 boards. He gives you a little bit of three-point shooting at 40%. Christian Hammond shoots 40% from three-point range for Santa Clara. Their country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. St. Mary's, one thing that they don't do is put you under duress, and for this Santa Clara team, they've been a country average team with their three-point shooting, but down low, they've been a top 45 team with their two-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a St. Mary's team that they are a team that does an amazing job grabbing its second and third chances. Top 75 team with this regard, and in a pressure spot, they shoot 80+% the free throw line, top 3 mark in the country. But that said, it is a St. Mary's team that as well has been outside the top 240 with their own two-point shooting percentage. Stout on the inside, top 35 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Mikey Lewis, Joshua Dent both give you 13 points per game. Between the two of them, they both shoot above 88% at the free throw line. They combine to shoot about 37% for 3. And Dylan Shaw now shooting 43% from 3 with 8 points per game. That helps, but with St. Mary's still about 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Santa Clara is not slow, but it's not like they're playing at warp speed. 101st in terms of total possessions per game. I think they get a lower scoring game that Santa Clara holds in. So I did set my line here at a 3.5, and we'll take 4+ here with Santa Clara, and I'm going to be in on the under as well. So I told 145.5, 761, 762. You've got Wisconsin, and they're going to be on the road against Oregon, and Oregon is a home underdog here of 4.5 to 5.5 points. So on scheme, 151.5 to 153, and I like the under. I set my total at a 146.5. Flat out, I just don't know if Oregon is going to be able to do their part with this total. Mid-tempo team, actually a low-tempo team, 291st in terms of total possessions per game. Wisconsin has certainly cranked up their tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This team is 116th in the country, but they've been playing a little bit more slowly here recently. They're not quite the same offensive team when they're away from home. Three-point shooting percentage takes no drop off. They shoot 35.2% from three-point range at home, 35.3% away from home, but overall they are averaging in the neighborhood about 13 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But Oregon is right now 219th in terms of points per possession. They're outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. Oregon is certainly giving it up from three-point range. They're allowing opponents to shoot 34.3% from the outside, 205th in the country, and it's a Wisconsin team that does rank in the top 20 in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from three-point range. And for Wisconsin, they're just doing the little things well. They're a top 30 team in terms of field turnovers on a per possession basis. They shoot at the free throw line right around about 77.5%. That's a top 25 mark in the country. You've got Nick Boyd along with John Blackwell, who have combined for 39.1 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 36.5% from the outside. Braden Carrington doesn't necessarily give you a ton of scoring at 7 points per game, but shoots 40% from 3. Nolan Winter gives you 9 rebounds per game, and Wisconsin has become a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Really, the lone thing that Oregon has had going for them is being a top 70 team with regards to percentage of their their missed shots are resulting in an offensive rebound. Now the good news for them is getting back Nate Biddle with about 16.5 points, 7 boards. That helps. He's a true 7-footer that shoots 33% from 3, but still your main guy in the backcourt, Jackson Shell, said being out has just caused a lot of dysfunction, a lot of turnovers, and just sloppy offense here for Oregon. You've got KJ Evans along TK Simpkins, who've been able to combine for about 25 points per game, and Simpkins just shoot 35% from 3, but with Oregon really giving it up on the defensive side of things. Their offense just really not having any sort of shooting whatsoever. They're outside the top 230 with regards to 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I don't think that they do their part with the total. I think that Wisconsin goes on the road, gets the job done. So somehow line at 7.5, willing to lay with Wisconsin, and I'm going to be in on the under as well. 763, 764. Washington State is on the road against Loyola Marymount, and Loyola Marymount does find themselves in this ordeal as a 1.5-point underdog in a lot of spots. So this game between 151 to 152, and it's not a total of a 148.5. I do like the under, and I'm going to take Loyola Marymount on the money line. I like the fact that Loyola Marymount has been as stout on the inside as they have been. They're a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Marymount is going to give it up a little bit more from the outside as they're about 199th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And Washington is a solid 3-point shooting team as they've been a team that, in terms of points per possession, they rank 117th in the country. But that said, they're averaging about 16.7 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home for Washington State from 3-point range. They're shooting about 40.2% at home. That goes down to 32.8% away from home, and they are 302nd in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at 36.2%. You've had Ace Glass break glass in case of emergency for 16 points, give you 37% 3-point shooting, and you've got a pair of guys that have been able to do a solid job on the glass, and Emil Yeho along with Ende Okafor. They combine for about 11 rebounds per game as Washington State is not allowing a lot of second and third chances. They've been a top 40 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so Loyola Marymount not going to get those opportunities on the glass, but they haven't been getting those all season long to start with, and Yeo does shoot in the high 30s from 3-point range himself, but with Loyola Marymount, even though they've been a bit sloppy with the ball, they're outside the top 235 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. You got a Washington State team that does not put you under any sort of duress whatsoever. Outside the top 300 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, on offense outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and with Loyola Marymount continuing to be a relatively solid team on the inside with being able to get relatively good production out of the main backcourt pieces at Rodney Hot Rod Brown. He's been able to shoot 38% from 3, 14 points per game. MJ Amy, he gives you a steal and a half, 14.5 points, shoots 36% from 3-point range. For this Loyola Marymount team, your top rebounder has been Jalen Shelley, who's been able to give you about 6.5 boards, 13.5 points per game. Eric McBride throws in their 5+ boards per contest. Now, Shelley continues to be out of the fold. I have him handicapped out in this game. Maybe there's a chance that he comes back, but I'm not thinking that that's going to be the case here. But in his absence, you've been able to get quite a bit out of Ricos Josias, who transferred on over from LaSalle. Actually shoots 40+% from 3 as a 6'10" big man. Only give you about 3.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, but does provide a little bit of, shall we say, support down low. With this being a Loyola Marymount team that has been able to do a solid job in terms of just being able to hold things down inside the arc. They do give up second and third chances, but Washington State, a team that even though they do a nice job in terms of not allowing you to grab second and third chances, are outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. I think Loyola Marymount gets the job done on the money line in a relatively mid-tempo game and a relatively middle of the, shall we say, road sort of game with regards to scoring. Semi-total 148.5. I'm in on the under and with Loyola Marymount. Made them the 2.5-point favorite. I do like them outright on the money line. These last two games are the games that were supposed to be played yesterday. They got added to the bottom of the board, so let's dive in. 765, 766. Wake Forest are on the road against Boston College. Boston College does find themselves as a home underdog of 4.5 points. So on this game, 144 to 144.5. Did set a total of a 141.5. I like the under for Boston College. Not a fast team, 256th in terms of total possessions per game, and I wish I could put it any other way with Boston College, but they can't shoot. They honestly don't take too bad care of the ball. They're a top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they're right now shooting 30.3% from 3-point range as 336th in all of college basketball. In terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, they're 298th. They're outside the top 300 with their free throw shooting percentage, and as a defense has been solid. They're 90th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. If you look at them in their home games, that does fall just a hair outside the top 100, but still pretty solid. For Wake Forest, they're more around 204th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, mainly because they're well outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They've not been the world's greatest team with regards to their interior defense, but this is a team that they force havoc with generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, overall they are 64th in the country. If you look at games played away from minimum. This ascends into the top 55, and for Wake Forest, you've been able to get quite a bit of versatility out of Nate Calmezzi, who's been able to shoot in the high 30s from three-point range, totals out over 4 assists per game. He's flying the team with about 10.5 points per game, and then Juke Harris, 21 points, 6.5 boards, mid-30s three-point shooter. So these guys have been able to do a nice job there, and for Wake Forest, country average team with their three-point shooting percentage, more around the top 100 with regards to that 2-point shooting percentage. In a pressure spot, they also shoot 76% at the free throw line, which is a big reason why I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'd be willing to lay up to 5 with them, mainly because for Boston College, even though this has been a rock-solid defensive team, they're not going to put you under duress. Boston College, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, they're outside the top 300, but they've been a top 80 team with regards to both opponents' 2-point shooting percentage and in terms of fewest free throw attempts made on a per possession basis as well. But that said, this is also a team that they just don't have much outside of Fred Payne and Donald Hand. These two guys combined for about 29 points per game. The Payne train shoots 33% from 3. Hand gives you 5 boards and just under a steal per contest, but he shoots 23% from 3. Lucatuz actually does shoot 43% from 3, but only about 6.9 points per game, and it's pretty much a lone guy on the roster that shoots about 33% from 3. And I just think that if Boston College is in a free throw spot where they need to hit free throws, 64.3% at the free throw line, that's going to haunt them. So I did set a total of a 141.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5 here with Wake Forest. And then 767, 768, you've got Providence, and they're going to be playing us to Xavier. And the X-Men are an underdog here of 5.5 to 6.5 points, 170.5 to 171 is the total. Set my total at a 168. I do like the under. Now, you've got a Providence team that's just absolutely gunned it this year. They're 9th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Xavier is looking to move it as well. They're 39th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and neither defense has been good for Xavier. They're 209th in the country in terms of points allowed on the per possession basis, and that's the better defense of the two. Providence is 290th, but I will say for Providence, they haven't been too bad down low. They're a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and at home, they're aligned teams to shoot 36.9% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a Xavier team that they're aligned teams away from them to shoot about 33% from 3. That should keep them somewhat lively in this game. Now, I did set my line at a 6, between a 5.5 to a 6.5. I personally would rather take 6.5 rather than a lay 5.5, mainly because this is a Xavier team that has actually done the little things okay. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're not allowing a ton of second and third chances either. They're a top 60 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Meanwhile, for Providence, they are allowing quite a few second and third chances, even with Oswin down low, give you 7 boards and a pair of blocks per game. This Providence team more around about 168th with regards to defensive rebound percentage. For Xavier, you've been able to carry all the way with Trey Carroll being able to give you 18.5 points, 6 boards. He shoots about 36% from 3, and Jovan Misevich has been able to shoot 43.9% from 3. Xavier as a whole, they're shooting about 36.5% from 3. That's a top 60 mark in the country. Meanwhile, for Providence, you've got a pair of guys in Jalen Sellers along with Jason Edwards, who are both giving you approximately 17.3 points per game. With Sellers, he shoots over 40% from 3, 87% at the free throw line. If Providence does need to close it out at the charity stripe, they shoot 76.5% while they're there. That's a top 55 mark in the country. They have also been a little bit careless with the ball. They are outside the top 200 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis, giving up all the second and third chances that they do, even though they're pretty strong on the inside with regards to their defense, and they've been a top 75 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. I think that allows Xavier to remain lively, and I do think that those turnovers could cost you an over. So I'm in on the under, so I told 168, and at 6.5 plus, won't take the points with Xavier. And that wraps up the normal Las Vegas betting board, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-607, 306-608. You've got Bucknell, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Army, and Army does find themselves as a favorite here of 2.5 points. So on this game, it is between 141.5 to 142, and I do like the over. I set my total at a 143.5, mainly because you've got an Army team that they're looking to go bombs away from 3-point range. They're a top 15 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3. They shoot 33.9% from 3-point range at home. That goes down to about 32% away from home, and Army certainly gives it up from 3. They're 293rd in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but Bucknell, they allow opponents to shoot 38% from 3-point range, 356th in the country, and that's a big reason why I did set Army here as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Bucknell team that just frankly has been really sloppy with regards to their offense as well. They are 317th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Army has been a top 125 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage as well, with with Tate Lazowski, give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Now, Armandores, on the flip side for Bucknell, he's been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of giving you about 15.5 points, 4.5 boards at 6'11", but Archelaus Spendone is pretty much his lone form of support, 11.5 points, 6 boards, does give you a pair of assists per game, but you've been dealing with the injury to Ruyat Bajak. You've had Brandon McCreesh be out for pretty much the entirety of the season. Jaden Williams does shoot about 32.5% for 3, but Bucknell, they shoot just 30% from the outside themselves. They're outside the top 320 in all of college basketball. They've been good at the free throw line. They shoot about 77% at the free throw line, but also outside the top 265 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. And then Ryan Curry, 13.5 points, 4 boards, 4.5 assists. He gives you 36.5% 3-point shooting. So Jackson Bell, Jackson Furman, they combine for about 21.5 points per game. Both shoot about 36% from 3. Army at a pressure spot, they only shoot about 71.5% of the free throw line, but they have the advantage on the glass. They're a better team in terms of taking care of the ball, and they are outside the top 275 with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentages. Also, like the over, so I told 143.5, and 1 to lay with Army, made them a favorite of 5.5 points, 306-609, 306-610. You've got Morgan State, they're going to be on the road against South Carolina State. South Kakalaki State, a 1.5 point favorite, 155.5 to 157.5 is the total. I made Morgan State the 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. Morgan State has been a rocket ship with regards to their tempo and conference play. Overall, 72nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game for the entirety of the season. Much faster in conference play, though, and for South Carolina State, about 119th in terms of total possessions per game. Significantly slower at home, and South Carolina State does shoot 36.5% from 3-point in their home games. Morgan State is about 320th in the country with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage, but it is a Morgan State team that is very much looking to pile drive the ball a little bit more inside, and they face off against a South Carolina State team that is outside the top 330 with regards to own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and South Carolina State is right now 356th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Morgan State has been much better here in conference play, and they've got 2 really good facilitators as you get a combined 10.2 assists per game out of Rob Lawson along with Elijah Davis. They've been able to combine for about 25.5 points per game, and now you've got Alfred Worrell, who shoots 38% for 3, 87% at the free throw line. It's Morgan State top 50 team in terms of free throws attempted per game. They shoot about 73.5% at the charity stripe. South Carolina State, they very much do put you on the free throw line, and for this Morgan State team, they have been a top 175 team with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a South Carolina State team that is just getting absolutely blown away on the glass. You've been able to get about 5 boards, 8.5 points per game out of Cameron Clark, but still, this is a team that's outside the top 300 with regards to their rebound percentage. They've been outside the top 350 with their own 2-point shooting percentage as well. Jane Johnson, Owen Bronson, they combine for about 24.5 points per game, but let's say that you get into a tight spot. It's a South Carolina State team that they shoot 65.4% the free throw line. That is the bottom 15 mark in the country. Top 5 team in terms of fouls committed in terms of a per game and a per possession basis, with them turning the ball over 15 times per game. I think that Morgan State gets the job done. I do think that the turnovers cost you an over, especially with South Carolina State outside the top 235 in terms of possessions per game at home. So I do like Morgan State on the money line, made them a favorite of 3.5 points, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 153.5, 306-611, 306-612. Queens NC is going to be on the road against Eastern Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky does find themselves as a home underdog of 1.5 points, 165.5 is the total. Set Queens NC as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Queens NC team that's absolutely awful in terms of their defense, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 344th in the country, but for this Eastern Kentucky team, they're 342nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not generating turnovers the way that they have in the past. Now, Eastern Kentucky, a top 110 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home, but this is the Queens NC team that's been really good with their offense, 29th in the country in terms of points per possession, as right now for Queens, you've got 6 different guys that give you at least 10 points per game. Nasir Man has been the man for the team, as he's been able to give you 13 points, 5.5 boards, really the lone guy on the roster. He gives you over 5.5 rebounds per game, but for Queens, they're just really good on the inside, top 25 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They don't generate any turnovers whatsoever, and they do find themselves in terms of defensive rebound percentage well outside the top 275 there, but it's an Eastern Kentucky team that is also going to give up a lot of second and third chances, 260th with regards to their own defensive rebound percentage, even with Matavius Myrick give you 13 plus points per game. He throws in there about 7 rebounds per game. Eastern Kentucky has been able to have Turner Buttery be able to do a nice job helping out Juan Cranford in the backcourt. They combine for 23 points per game. Both shoot between 36 and 37% from 3, and Eastern Kentucky is a team that will put you on the free throw line. They're outside the top 3 in terms of free throw attempts allowed on on a per possession basis, and they're just getting blasted on the inside. They're outside the top 330 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Eastern Kentucky is a team that they take over 50% of their field goal attempts from 3-point range. That is a top 20 mark in the country, and they've been able to shoot it relatively well from 3-point range. Eastern Kentucky, right now, they shoot from 3-point range right around about 34.5% at home. That's a top 175 mark in the country, but I think that Queens is going to be a little bit more efficient on offense. I think that this is going to be a relatively up-tempo game. For Eastern Kentucky, 128th in terms of total possessions per game. Queens just inside the top 100 at 86, so I did set my total here at a 165.5. Right now, seeing between 165.5 and a 165 or less in on the overhand. Willing to lay with Queens at C, made them a 3.5 point favorite. 3 of 6-6-13, 3 of 6-6-14. Lehigh is going to be playing us to American. American is an American-sized favorite of 6 to 6.5 points, and your total, that is a 139.5 to 140.5, and I do like the over, so my total 142.5 now. It's an American team that's outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Lehigh more of a mid-tempo team at 196th, and Lehigh is a top 12 team in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that come from inside the 3-point line, but it is an American team that has been able to do a pretty solid job on the inside, while their 3-point shooting percentage at home is just 31.5%, so they are going to be looking to pile drive the ball inside. And for American, if they're in a pressure spot, they do shoot 76.5% at the free throw line. That is a top 50 mark in the country, but could still only set them as a 4.5 point favorite, as we've seen this Lehigh team get off from 3-point range. They're shooting about 35.2% from the outside. That's a top 110 mark in the country. And Nasir Woodlock is getting your best overall scorer in this game. He's been able to supply this team with darn near 20 points per contest. Throws in their 3 assists, shoots 42.5% for 3. Hayden Colby has been able to shoot 41.5% from the outside. And if you look at conference play and conference play only, it's a Lehigh team that is shooting about 36.5% from 3. Now they've been allowing teams to shoot 34% from 3-point range against them as well. And Lehigh, they're outside the top 320 with regards to overall rebound percentage, even with having Eduardo Benoit be able to give you about 6 boards per contest. But now he's dealing with a bit of injury. Joshua Ingram, 10.5 points per game. But I do think that Lehigh is going to be able to do a solid job in terms of being able to hold in there, mainly because they're also a team that's been solid at the free throw line. They shoot about 73% at the charity stripe. And it's an American team that's very hit or miss with regards to, shall we say, backcourt play. They're a top 80 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but Lehigh taking good care of the ball. American is a top 120 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, with Greg Jones, Maynard Collins combined for 25.6 points per game. Neither guy shoots about 30% from 3, but Jeff Spruce, 41% 3-point shooter, 9.5 points per game. It's an American team that can be had on the inside. They're outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and not a team that's going to do a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Outside the top 270 with regards to their own offensive rebound percentage. I think that keeps Lehigh lively in this game, and I do think that this comes down to late game fouls for the over. So I told 142.5. I like the over, and 5+ here with Lehigh. 3 of 6-6-15, 3 of 6-6-16. Lipscomb is on the road against West Georgia, and West Georgia does find themselves as a home underdog here of 5.5 points. So I'll scheme 152.5, and I said Lipscomb as a favorite of 4 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. It's a Lipscomb team that shot it really well from 3-point range, and they're an up-and-up team. They're a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game, while being 47th in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage at 36.6%. West Georgia has been a solid 3-point shooting team all of a sudden. They're in the top 200, and they've got, in my opinion, the most versatile player out there on the floor, Sheldon Williams-Dryden, who's been supplying this team with over 20 points per game. He throws in there about 8 or so rebounds per contest. Not necessarily a great 3-point shooter, but you know what? You've got some nice ancillary pieces who have been able to step up in the interim for them, as you're getting about 16 points, pair of assists per contest out of Josh Smith, who shoots 35% from 3-point range. You've had Malcolm Noel be a little bit of a versatile piece with 3 assists, 8.5 points per game. And I would say a West Georgia team that has had their issues on defense are well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're actually okay in terms of guarding the arc. Top 250 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage are very much vulnerable on the inside. They're about 300th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but also have a Lipscomb team that they're not necessarily a team that is going to be putting you under too much duress. They're a team that is outside the top 150 with regards to turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Away from them, they generate pretty much all of their turnovers when they are at home, and Lipscomb has been outside the top 175 with regards to overall rebound percentage as well. They do a good job in terms of executing on the inside. Top 100 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Charlie Williams at 6'10", about 11 points, shoots 35.5% for 3. Ross Caladino has been able to be a 42% 3-point shooter with about 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Lipscomb, if they get put at the free throw line, they do shoot about 76.5% at the free throw line. This is a West Georgia team that has been giving out quite a few fouls, so they are going to be probably finding themselves there. I do think that this is going to be quite a bit of an up and down game. Semi-total 156, but I do think that with the way that West Georgia has been working on their ball security in conference play, fewer than 10 turnovers per game, I think that that's going to be able to keep them alive in this game. And West Georgia, when it comes to conference play, they have been able to get a lot more out of Colton Griffin, who's been overall for the season only supplying the team with about 7.5 points per game, but has come alive, being able to give you a steal and a half per contest, and from 3-point range in conference play play, shooting about 36% from three. So I think that you get a nice up and down game. Set my total at a 156. I like the over, and I'm willing to take anything above 4 points here with West Georgia. 36-17, 36-18. Navy's on the road against Loyola Maryland. Loyola is a home underdog of 7.5 points. So this game, it is 145.5, and I like the under. I set my total at a 136.5. I have a Navy team that is about 320th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Navy has been able to do such a good job along the perimeter. Top 25 team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They themselves shoot 35.4% from three, albeit that does fall to about 31.3% away from home, but it's a Navy team that's also not allowing second and third chances. They're 28th in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, for Loyola Maryland, they're doing a good job in terms of not allowing second and third chances as well. Only about 21.4% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound in their home games. So I do think that you're going to be able to get an under here. But for Loyola Maryland, they're right now basing their backcourt around Jacob Theodosio along Braden Speed, who combined for about 29.7 points per game. And Speed has been able to quickly shoot 35.5% from three-point range. But it's also a Loyola Maryland team that has been having a very difficult time with regards to their three-point shooting as well. It's a Loyola Maryland team that when they're at home from three-point range, they're only shooting about 32.6% from the outside. That's outside the top 255 in all of college basketball. Amit Adir has been in and out of the lineup. He's been one of your top rebounders, being able to get this team with about 5 boards, 14 points per contest. And with Adir, should be good to go here. He's been a little bit up and down though recently. And for Navy, they should be able to control the glass with Aiden Kaoi being able to give you a double-double, 15.5 points and half rebounds per game. Also, Benjini gives you 18 points. He shoots 47% from three-point range, and for Navy, they become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per-possession basis. They do a solid job in terms of executing their offense on the inside as well. They're a top 175 team with regards to both their own two-point shooting percentage and opponents' two-point shooting percentage. I think that they suck the life out of this game, and if they need to cover at the free throw line, they shoot 74% at the free throw line. So, Navy is an 8.5 point road favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and like the under, set my total 136.5, 36-19, 36-20. Holy Cross is on the road against Boston U. Boston U is a favorite here of anywhere between 7.5 to 8.5 points. So on this game, 143.5, and I'm in on the under, set my total 137. You got two super slow teams in this game. For Boston U, in terms of total possessions per game, they are checking in 329th in all of college basketball. Holy Cross 338th, and Holy Cross has been able to do a solid job as a top 150 team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They shoot about 31.4% from the outside themselves away from them. That's outside the top 275, and Boston U's forte has been their three-point shooting. They're 8th in the country at 39.2% from three. That goes up to 42.5% in their home games. And while Boston U has been well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're not allowing second and third chances. Top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You've had Michael Air McNair give you 17 points. He shoots about 46% from three-point. Chance Gladen has been able to supply the team with about 14 points. Does shoot 89% at the free throw line, but in a pressure spot, Boston U only shooting about 72% at the free throw line. And Boston U, to their credit, they've been a top 75 team with regards to their two-point shooting percentage as well. For Holy Cross, they've been dealing with an injury to one of their main pieces in Joe Nugent. He's one of their top scorers with about 11.5 points, shoots 40% from three. With him being out, that affects the three-point shooting, but I do think that they're still going to be able to get some good production off Tyler Boston, Gabe Warren, who have been able to combine for about 26.5 points per game between the two of them, shoot 35% from three, but it's also a Holy Cross team that, other than Aiden Dessou, who gives you 5.2 rebounds per game, don't have a single player on the roster that gives you over 4.3 rebounds per game, and they've been very vulnerable on the inside, outside the top 300 with regards to their opponent's two-point shooting percentage, and outside the top 250 with their own two-point shooting percentage. They fail to get to the free throw line as they're a bottom 50 team with regards to free throw attempts per game. They don't generate a lot of turnovers, and I do think that as a result, you get a bit of a slog of a game, and with Joe Nugent being out, I think that really affects the Holy Cross offense. So by total at a 137, so I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Boston. You made them a 9-point favorite, 36-21, 36-22. Lafayette is on the road against Colgate. Colgate is looking for a minty fresh cover, as you're going to be getting them as a favorite of 8.5 to 9 points. So on this game, 144.5 to 145.5, and I like the under, so by total 141.5. Colgate, not necessarily a team that's pushing a ridiculous tempo, 188th in terms of total possessions per game. Lafayette is 292nd, and Lafayette just is not getting anything going on offense. Outside the top 275 in terms of points per possession, they shoot only 31.9% from three-point range. That's outside the top 285 in the country, and you've got a Colgate team that has been shooting 38.2% from three-point range in their home games. That's at a top 65 mark in the country. They go up against a Lafayette team that has been, well, they've been hot and cold with regards to giving it up from three. And Colgate, I will say, at home they allow opponents to shoot 37% from three. That goes down to 33% away from home. Meanwhile, Lafayette, they're allowing you to shoot 36.1% from three-point range, so I think that that's going to be a big issue. Now, I am going to be in on the under mainly because Lafayette is a very one-dimensional team. They've only got two guys that give you double figures, as you've been able to have Caleb Williams, though not the Bears quarterback, give you about 16 points, shoots 34.5% for three. Andrew Phillips, 14 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 32% for three. Mark Butler, Reef Jackson, they're both right around about 10 points per contest themselves, but they don't give themselves any sort of second and third chances outside the top 275 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. Now, they're not allowing a lot of second and third chances, and Colgate is not a team that gives themselves second and third chances, even with the versatility of Jalen Cox, who's been doing a nice job getting 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, and he's been shooting darn near 40% from three-point range right now. Colgate, in terms of offensive rebound percentage, 303rd in the country. Lafayette, 320th, but for Colgate, you've also had the ancillary pieces be able to step up, be able to hit some threes like a Kyle Carlissimo, who's been able to get out there, shoot about 36% for three, 8 points per contest. You've got Sam Wright, who doesn't give you a lot from the outside, but 12.5 points, 4.5 boards. It's a Colgate team that has been pretty solid on the inside, top 125 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, top 175 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and in a relatively slow and controlled game, I think that they pull away. Semi-line at a 13.5, willing to lay with Colgate, and like the under, semi-total 141.5, 306-623, 306-624. Central Arkansas is going to be on the road facing off against Austin Peay, and the Governators find themselves as a favorite of 3.5 points. 151.5 is the total, and I was seeing before a 150.5, still seeing that out there. I'd be willing to take that over. I did semi-total 151.5. Central Arkansas has been really vulnerable on the inside, outside the top three with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but that said, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc, and they are a top 75 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Both of these teams playing at a relatively similar tempo. Austin Peay, 143rd in terms of total possessions per game. Central Arkansas is 118th, and Central Arkansas not quite the same 3-point shooting team when they're away from home rather than when they're at home. When Central Arkansas is at home, this team has gone just absolutely nuclear, shooting 39% for three, 31.7% when they're away from home. Meanwhile, you've got an Austin Peay team that they're shooting about 39.5% for three-point at home, 32% away from home. So you've got big giant home and road splits there, and Rashad Marshall has been able to step up for Austin Peay in a big way. He's been able to give you about 6 or so rebounds per game, double-figure amount of points. Austin Peay, top 50 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and it's a Central Arkansas team that, to their credit, they've been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of making the most out of their possessions, with Cameron Hunter give you 19 points, 2.5 assists, 4 boards. He shoots about 35% for three. Ty Robinson, 35% three-point shooter, 14 points per game. Central Arkansas, top 150 team in terms of ball security, and Central Arkansas has been a top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Again, just getting blasted on the inside, though they themselves are a top 55 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, and Austin Peay is outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So I do think they get enough points here for the over, and Austin Peay, if they need to cover at the free throw line, they shoot 74.5% at the charity stripe. Colin Parker, 17.5.6 boards, shoots 40% for three. Zaire Collins has been the quarterback of the defense, 2.5 steals, 13.5 points, 34% three-point shooting. I do think that with the way that Austin Peay does such a great job in terms of generating turnovers, and the way that they just shoot so well from both three-point range, and they've been a top 175 team with regards to their inside 2-point shooting percentage, I think that they get the job done here. Willing to lay up to 5 with Austin Peay, and I like the over of a 151 or less, and we're going to have things up with 306, 625, 306, 626. Bellarmine is on the road against North Alabama. North Alabama, a home underdog of 2.5 points, 148.5 is the total. I like the over, sub my total 151.5. Not going to be an up-tempo game, as right now for Bellarmine, in terms of total possessions per game, they're 319th, and North Alabama, they're 294th. North Alabama is just absolutely terrible with their defense. I recognize that they're well outside the top 275 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, even though you've got Cornelius Robinson give you 10 plus points, 9 plus rebounds per game, but 348th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 350 at home. Bellarmine out of 365 Division I teams, 365th, but Bellarmine is doing a great job in terms of executing both with regards to their interior play and their outside play. They shoot really well at the free throw line. As Bellarmine at the charity stripe right now, they are 14th in the country. They shoot over 78% at the free throw line. Their three-point shooting has been able to do a relatively solid job at traveling as well. As Bellarmine, they shoot 38.3% for three-point overall. That goes to 36.8% away from home, as you've been able to have the William & Mary transfer in Jack Karzinski supply about 20.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 42% for three-point. Kanan Gooding, he's been able to shoot 42% for three. Gives you about 12 points per game, and you just don't have that right now for North Alabama. North Alabama is a team that I don't think that they're going to execute too well against a Bellarmine defense that is so awful, because they only shoot about 30.8% for three, outside the top 300 in the country. Their main scorer in the backcourt, in Kanan Jefferson, he gives you 13 points per game. He's dealing with an injury. Dante Bacchus has a bit of a big man, 15 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but don't have a lot of outside shooting. It's a North Alabama team that has really been giving it up on the inside as well. They're outside the top 320 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. North Alabama not bad at getting to the free throw line, but they shoot 68% at the free throw line. If it comes down to a pressure spot in terms of free throws. Bellarmine, in my opinion, gets the job done. I do think that they're going to be efficient enough to be able to get you the over. So, sub I told 151.5. I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 here with Bellarmine, and that wraps things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Blake Lovell. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from the Sign Podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUDit_81. Keep in mind, letters M, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm with you guys every single day to give you picks and analysis on every game every day, so I'll be back with you once you get them out. Thank you.